Hello everyone, welcome to another exciting tech tutorial where you learn how to build and deploy a modern developer portfolio website from scratch. In this video, I will walk you through building a modern portfolio website step by step using Next.js, React, Tailwind CSS, and TypeScript. We'll focus on clean UI, responsive design, and reward project structure. So by the end, you have a professional portfolio you can confidently share with employers or clients. Let me actually take you through what we're going to build in this video. Now, when you actually land on this website, first of all, you're going to see a smooth animation in the hero section. We're going to create this logo right here, these nav links, and also we're going to create this download button. Now, everything you see here are going to be components. We're going to go with a component-based approach and place everything into its own component. These two buttons are going to be React reusable components. You are going to learn how to create reusable components in this project. Now, for these particular buttons, visitors of your website can actually click on this button to actually download your CV. You can see immediately your CV actually gets downloaded. We're also going to have the service section. Click on service. We're going to scroll down to the service section. You can see the smooth animations for these cards. After that, we'll create the resume section. You can actually see that cool animations too. We'll also create the project section. And you can see the smooth animation right here, where you can actually output all your previous projects, all the personal projects you've actually worked on. We'll create the skills section where you can actually outline your skills, and you can actually see the smooth spin animation on these cards right here when they actually pop into the web page. Now, in this section, you can add all the skills or the technology you actually work with as a developer. We also create the testimonials section where you can actually leave testimonials and nice things that previous clients or employers have actually said about you and your work. We'll create the contact section with this smooth animation right here. We'll create this contact details, and also we'll create this contact form right here. Now, for the form, unlike most forms you see on YouTube tutorials, this one is going to be fully functional, which means when a user submits the form, when a user submits your contact form in your website, you're actually going to get that. You're actually going to get that as an email notification. So I want to populate the form with these details right here, and I just click on send message. It's actually going to actually send the message. You can see the success message right here, form submitted successfully. We're not going to stop there. We're going to ensure that your new portfolio website is actually fully responsive. So it doesn't matter the device you're actually viewing this website on, it's going to look responsive and it's going to look good for all screen devices. Okay. And for mobile devices, we're going to get this nice side menu right here. Now, if you are excited about building this project, smash on the like button and leave a comment below. 1 like equals to 1 prayer for the YouTube algorithm to push this content to more people like you are going to find it very, very helpful. And basically just consider this as a very little way of you supporting this channel. And lastly, if you've not subscribed to the channel, ensure you do that and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on future modern web development projects we're going to build together on this channel. And the technologies we're going to be using, first of all, we're going to actually start up with React. Now, React is a library that allows us to create user interfaces for both web and also for mobile devices. But we're going to be working on the web, and in this project, we're going to learn how to use React to create reusable components that we have to create once and we can reuse multiple times in our website. We also learn how and when to use hooks like the use state hook and also the use effect hook when building a website with React. Now, React out of the box is not actually fully optimized, and also it doesn't provide us with SEO and also page performances. That's why we are going to pair React with Next.js. Now, Next.js is a React framework that is used by some of the world's largest companies like Netflix. Next.js enables you to create high-quality web applications with the power of React components. Now, Next.js actually is going to provide us with page optimization, image optimization, server-side ranging, which means our static code we're going to write in our application are going to be rendered on the server. And this is going to actually help improve the SEO performance of this website. That way, search engines like Google will be able to crawl this website and actually understand the contents of this website and index your website properly. Now, for styling, we're going to make use of Tailwind CSS. Now, Tailwind CSS is one of my personal favorite CSS libraries. Okay, it allows you to actually create clean and modern responsive UI with the power of Tailwind classes. Okay, so all we have to do is just add Tailwind utility classes to our GSS, and we'll be able to create a clean UI. Now, I'm sure you're actually going to love working with Tailwind CSS. It's going to make it easy for us to actually build and style a modern responsive website without actually thinking much about the complexities of CSS. Now, the very first thing we have to do, we have to actually set up a new Next.js application. To do that, we're going to head over to the official Next.js website, next.js.org. Okay, I'll just click on Get Started. And now right here in this Get Started, you can actually see what Next.js is. Okay, if you want to actually read about Next.js, if this is your first time working with Next.js, okay, so you can actually get familiar with this React framework. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to go to installation right here, and then you can actually see what we have to do to actually set up a new Next.js application. Now, you have to actually ensure you have Node.js installed in your computer before you can actually run this command. And the Node.js version has to be Node.js version 20.9 and above. Now, if this is your first time building a React application, you're not actually familiar with what Node.js is, okay, you can actually check if you already have Node.js installed, okay. So to do that, we just go to our command prompt or window share. We just type node-v. I'll click on enter. Now, if you have Node.js installed, it's going to actually show you the Node.js version is actually installed in your computer. But if you don't, you're going to see an error that you don't have Node.js installed, okay? And to actually set up Node.js, all you have to do is just go to nodejs.org and actually follow the installation process and install Node.js to your computer. Now, for we that already have Node.js installed, we can move on to the next step, which is actually setting up our Next.js project. So I'm going to scroll down there. I'm going to copy this command right here, nps create next app at latest. I copy this. I head back to my Visual Studio Code. I'll click on this. I'm going to go to a new terminal, and then we're just going to paste that command we copied from the Next.js website right here, nps create next app at latest. Now, this command is going to create the latest version of Next.js for us, but we want to create this Next.js project inside this portfolio website folder right here, okay. So what we are going to do is say /, okay. That way the project is going to be created inside this folder. We're not going to create a new folder. So I'll click on enter. Now it's going to ask us to install some light package. I'll click on where I click on enter. And now we have to actually set up some configurations. Now we can actually use the default settings, or we can actually customize our own settings, okay. Now for more flexibility, I'm going to actually customize my own settings. So I'll go to no customize settings, okay. Now first of all, it's going to ask us if we'd like to use TypeScript. Of course, we want to use TypeScript to actually write safe and typed code, okay. So I'll click on yes. And now it's going to ask us which lints I want to use. So I want to make use of ESLint. So I'll click on ESLint. Would you like to use React compiler? No, we don't want to make use of the old React compiler. I'll click on no. Then would you like to use Tailwind CSS? Obviously, we're going to make use of Tailwind CSS for styling our application. So I'll click on yes. Would you like your code inside SRC directory? Yes. Yes, we obviously want that so that we can actually organize our code better. So I'll click on yes. Would you like to use app footer? Obviously, yes. We want to make use of app footer. Would you like to customize the import alias? No. And with that, it's going to actually start installing all the dependencies we need for this project. After a while, all the packages are going to be installed, which is going to depend on your network strength. So I'm just going to close this a bit. Now, after all the packages have been installed, when we open up this our folder right now, you can see our Next.js project folders right here, okay. And this is the default folder structure of a new Next.js application. And inside this node modules is where all the files we just installed, all these files that come with the default Next.js application, all the packages are going to live, okay. So now let's actually run our Next.js projects. To do that, we're going to run npm run dev. And then after that, you can actually follow this right here, http localhost 300. Now, when we open up our project in the browser, you're going to see this Next.js project right here. And this is the default Next.js project, okay. First of all, we're going to get rid of the codes we don't need. So I'll just go back to my Visual Studio Code. I'll close up this terminal now. And then I'll go to src. I'll go to globals of CSS. I'll just get rid of all the CSS files we don't need, which is all these right here. I'll get rid of them because we're going to make use of Tailwind CSS. So we need this import Tailwind CSS. And then I'll go to the page.tss file. I'll just get rid of everything here. Then in place of this, I'm just going to return a H1 tag. I'm going to say hello everybody. and then I get rid of this image tag up here, this image tag import up here. Okay, so next I'll go to the layer.css file. Now this layer.css file is the layout file that is going to control our entire application. This is the layout file that controls the entire application, which means whatever page we create in this application, they're going to be rendered between this opening and closing HTML tag and this opening and closing HTML body tag. Okay, so whenever page we create a new page, or if it's this page.css file we're actually rendering in the browser right now, it's going to be rendered right here where we have these children right here. It's basically a layout file, which means whatever style we apply to this page right here is going to be applied to the entire application. So now we can actually change the metadata of this right here. First of all, I'm going to change this to John's portfolio website, and then the description is going to be John's portfolio website, like that. Closing tag. I won't save this. You're going to notice that we actually get that hello everybody right here. Now that's what we actually see in the web page, and also the title of this web page is now John's portfolio website. Great job. And next, what we want to do is actually use our own font. We don't want to make use of these fonts that comes with the Next.js application. We want to actually use our own font. Okay, so I get rid of this one. So instead of const jet sans, I want to say const. I use Poppins. Okay, create a variable called Poppins, and then we just call Poppins from Next font Google. Okay, and then we can get rid of this other two import right here. And then instead of font get sans, I'll say font Poppins. Then I'll pass in the width. I want 300, 400, 500, 600, 700. Okay, and these are actually the font width we actually want from this font. Okay, and then all we have to do is scroll down, get rid of this right here. And then right here, you're going to pass that font, right? You're going to say Poppins dot class name. I'll save that. And that's going to ensure that the font that's actually applied to our application is going to be Poppins. Okay, great. And finally, for this layout file, I'm going to add a background to this. I'll give this a BG slate of 950. It's going to be the background for the entire application. Remember, I said any style we apply to this root layout file is going to be applied to the entire application. Okay, so when we go back to the project, you can actually see that this cool background, this very clean and cool background, has actually been applied. Great. So the very first component we're going to create is going to be our Navbar component. So let's do that. So I'll head to this SRC folder. Inside this folder, I want to create another folder called components. Now inside this components folder, I'm create a new folder called general. Okay, and inside this general folder, I'm going to create a folder called Navbar. Now inside the Navbar folder, we're going to create the Navbar component. I can actually see that. I just expand this a bit. Inside this Navbar component, we're going to create a navbar.tsx file. Okay, RFC. Now just close this back up, and then get rid of this import. Now, inside this navbar is going to return a nav. And so you can actually see this navbar. I'm going to give it a Tailwind class of height of 18. I'll give it a BG red of 700. So now I'm going to save this. I'll save the layout file. Now we'll go back to the application. We can now actually see that navbar. Okay, now that's because we've actually created the navbar here, but we've not actually imported the navbar inside this layout file. So up here, what we're going to do just before this children tab, we're going to actually import the Navbar component like that. I'll save that. Now we'll head back to our project. We should actually see that navbar right here. You can actually see that red navbar right here. Okay, great job. So now head back to the Navbar component. Actually add some styles to this. I'll give it a height of 18, which we've already done. Now I want the navbar to be fixed at the top of the web page. We'll give it a position of fixed, a Z of 15, and then we'll give it a width of full, Now inside this navbar, I'll create a div. I'm going to give this div a Tailwind class of flex. I want the items to be position center, so I'll give the item center. We'll give this a height of full, a justify content, a justify of between, a width of 90%, and margin horizontal of auto. And then inside this div, the very first thing we want to create is going to be our logo. So down here, we're going to actually create our logo. So I'll create a logo component. Now we're going to get an error because we've not actually created this logo yet. Okay, so let's actually do that. So inside this, I'm going to reopen this again. Inside this navbar folder, I'll create another component. I'll create another file called logo.tsx rfc. Now this logo is going to return a link. Now to actually make use of links in Next.js, we're going to import link from NextLink. So we are not making use of the default anchor tag. We're going to make use of link from the Next.js library. And also just for normal anchor tag, I have to pass in an href tag, which is where the link is going to actually lead to. And since this is the logo of the application, anytime a user clicks on the logo, we're just going to take the user to the home page, okay, as a root page. And then inside this logo, we're going to have a div that's going to have an icon, and we don't actually have an icon library installed. So let's quickly install an icon library. So I'm just going to open this up. I'll open up a new terminal. Then down here, I'll say npm install React icons. I click on enter. And that command is going to actually install the React icon library for us. So I'm going to close this back up. So now when we actually go to package.json, we can actually see React icons as one of our dependencies right here. I've chosen this React icons version 5.5.0. Great. So now we can actually make use of React icons in our application. Now the icon I actually want is one called code XML from React icons /lq. And then I'll give this div that has around this icon something with classes. I'll give it a width of 10, a height of 10, a background of gray 200, spell that correctly, gray 200. Now, if you're actually wondering where we are getting these Tailwind CSS classes from, it's actually very simple. We're actually getting these classes from the Tailwind CSS official documentation. Now, when we head over to tailwindcss.com, you can actually search for any properties we want. Okay, say I want to actually add padding to my application. I just search for padding, and it's going to tell me all I need to do to actually add padding to this application. Okay, so I just say padding. So I'll click on padding. It's going to bring me right here. Okay, you can see all we have to do to actually apply padding to our application. And when you scroll down, you actually see all the classes to actually apply padding. Okay, and you can actually see all the explanation right here. Okay, now this is how we actually get those classes, which means any class you want to actually add, you can actually search it in Tailwind CSS. Okay, say you want to actually search for heights, I'll just search for heights. Click on heights. I can actually see how to actually add heights. Okay, you just use h and specify the number you actually want to add. In this case, h96, h24. You can actually see the different variants right here. Okay, just like we did when we actually added heights to the navbar. I give this a rounded of full, a display of grid, and a place items. We don't do center. And then after this div, I want to add a paragraph tag. We're simply going to say web dev, and then I'll give this a Tailwind class test gray of, sorry, spell that gray correctly, test gray of 200, a font of bold, and for medium screens and above, I want to have a text of 2XL. Now when over on this, you can see right now this is going to be applied for when the screen size the user is viewing the application is over 778 pixels, 778 pixels and above. Now I don't want this p tag of the logo to be visible for small screen device, so I want to give it a Tailwind class of hidden, which is basically a display of non-property. And then for small screens and above, we'll give it a display of block. Now when we hover on this, you can see right now that this is going to be applied for screen size that are greater than 640 pixels. This is going to have a display of block. Edge is going to have a display of none. Just rearrange this a bit. So now all we have to do is actually import this component inside our navbar.tss file. So inside this navbar, just import this logo like that. Okay, great. So now we actually have the logo. So let's actually check out the output. So when we go back to the web page, we actually see that logo right here. Now, this logo is not exactly the way we actually want it to be. We don't want them to be arranged on top of each other. We want them to be arranged side by side. Okay, so let's do that. So we're going to go back to the logo component. So what we're going to do, we're going to add styles to this link tag that wraps around the div that holds the logo and this paragraph tag. So I'll give this a Tailwind class. I want them to have a display of flex arranged vertically center. So I'll give it items of center, and then I want to add a space, horizontal space of 2 between the icon and the web dev text. Okay, so now this is actually going to look way better. Great. We still have that hello everyone text right here. We don't have to worry about that. So head back to our navbar. So after our logo, we're going to create our nav link. For that, we're going to need another list. So I'm going to call another list tag. Now, in HTML, we want to do something like this. We just do li tag, and then we just drag it down multiple times, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, since we are working with React, we don't have to actually repeat ourselves that much. Okay, we can actually, there's actually a better way for us to do that. Okay, so what we are going to do instead is that up here, we're going to create an array of the link properties. Okay, and then we're going to map through them. So up here, let's do that. So up here, I'm going to create an array of objects. Name is going to be nav links, which is going to be an array of objects. And the first object is going to have a key called URL, and the value is going to be hashtag home. Okay, and this is going to be the URL for when the user clicks on this particular link. It's going to take the user to the home section, and then the label is going to be home. Add a comma at the end. So we just have to drag this down multiple times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this second one is going to be services. Third one is going to be resume. Fourth one is going to be project. The next one is going to be skills. The label is going to be skills. Then we're going to have testimonials. And then finally, we're going to have contacts. Actually missing one link. I think that's going to be skills. Okay. So this is going to be skills. So now all we have to do is actually map through this area, actually output it. Okay. So I'll just close this up. So down here, I'm going to scroll down. Then right here, you can simply say nav links dot. We're going to map through each of the link. So every time we map through each of the link, we just call it a link, and then we're just going to return a JSS. It's going to have an li tag, which is going to pass in a key, because every time you map through a list in React, you actually have to specify a key so that React knows how to actually track the item in the list. So I'll say link dot the URL. Okay. Now, since each of the URL are actually unique, you can actually make use of this as the key. And then in here, you're going to create a link tag. This href of this link tag, you just get that from next link. The href of this link tag is going to be link.url. Okay. And then the label of each of the links is going to be link.label. Okay, great. So now I'm going to add some styles to this. First of all, we're going to add some styles to the unordered lists. Now by default, we want this to be hidden from the viewport. We want to give it a display of none. And then for last screen difference, we'll give it a display of flex. Then a space x of 10. Then after that, we're going to add some styles to the link themselves so that they actually look good too. We'll give them a text gray of 200. On over, we'll give them a cyan, a text cyan of 300, a font of medium. We're going to add a transition property for it, which is going to be for the color. Then we'll add a duration. We want the transition from around 4 300 milliseconds, which is duration of 300. So I'll save that. Now when we head back to our project, we actually see those links, and when we hover on them, we can actually see that cyan color on each of these links, and they are looking really good. So next, what we want to work on is that we want to actually create this download button that's going to be on the right hand side of this navigation bar. But we're not going to just create it directly like when we're creating this logo of this. We want to make this a reusable component, because we're also going to make use of this link right here. Also, we're going to make use of this link in other parts of this website. Okay, now this is one of the most beautiful things and power of React. With React, we can actually create one button, actually reuse that button different times, actually by passing properties or props to that button. So let's actually do that. Now to do that, inside this general folder, I'm just going to open this up a bit. Inside this general folder, I'm going to create another file. I call this file link button.tsx. Okay, and this is going to be a reusable component. We're going to use multiple times in this application. We use the width of this back, and then inside this link button, we're just going to return a link tag, which we're going to get from next link. Okay, now we're going to notice that when we call this link button component right here and right here, we have a different icon which are positioned in the left and in the right hand side, and also we have different text. This one is saying see my work, and this one is saying download CV. Okay, now this is the beauty of React. We're going to create the component once, and based on the properties or props we pass to it, we're going to render the button with those properties. Now, first of all, we have to create type for the properties we want to pass to this component. So up here, I'm going to create an interface. So I'm saying interface link button props. Now, first of all, and most importantly, we're going to pass an href to this right here. The href is going to be of type string. Okay, the href is going to be basically the link we're going to pass, the parts of the link we're going to pass to this anchor tag. And then we're going to pass in a text. It's going to be the label of the link. It's going to be of type string. And after that, we're going to pass in an icon. And this icon is going to be of type icon type, which you can actually get from React icons. You're going to import icon type from React icons. Now, after that, we're going to pass in an icon position. Okay, where the icon is going to be positioned, whether left part of the button or the right part of the button. We're going to have to, the first one is going to be the right, and then the second one is going to be the left. Okay, now we're going to make this optional because there might be a case where you want to call a link tag and you don't want to pass any icons to it. So these are actually going to be optional. And then after that, we can pass in a type of a property called rounded, which is going to be Boolean. Now, the reason we are doing this is that when you look at these two buttons, this one has a rounded curve, this one is fully rounded, while this one is not fully rounded. Okay, so also we're also going to pass properties to actually render the border radius of the button based on the properties we actually pass to it. The button is either going to be rounded at the end, completely rounded, or not. And then finally, we're going to pass a property called download, which is also going to be Boolean. Now, that's because between these two buttons right here, this particular button is the one the user is going to click on when you want to download your CV. If you don't want to download your CV, this one you're going to click on. So this one is going to have a link to your CV, while this one is not going to have a link. So this one is not going to be a download link. This one is going to be a download link. So we have to specify when we actually call the component. So that is also now we can actually destructure add this prop. So right here, I'm going to say the props are going to have a type of link button props. So right here, you can actually destructure add the href, we'll destructure add the text, we'll destructure add the icon, which we are going to rename icon because we're going to convert it to a component. And then we'll destructure add the icon position, the rounded, and finally the download. Okay, so I'll just format this. And then we're going to say that this download by default is going to default to false. Okay, so by default the link is not going to be a download link except we actually specify otherwise when we call the component. And then also by default the icon position is going to have a default of right, which means anytime we call the icon position by default, it's going to be on the right hand side. Now this is going to return a JSX that's going to have a link tag in there, and then the href of that JSX is going to go to the href will pass as a prop to this component, we'll call this component. And then the download property of this link is going to be equals to download. Now this download, remember that it can either be true or false. Now if this is true, then the download prop thing, this link is going to be activated, which means the user can actually download with this link. Else is going to be false. And then the label of this link is simply going to be the text that's actually passed to this link. And now remember that we're going to have an icon at the left hand side or on the right hand side of this text right here. Okay, so we have to specify that. So up here, I'm going to say if an icon was passed to the link and the icon position is equivalent to left, then we're going to render the icon right here. Okay, so I just call the icon component, give the icon a Tailwind class of width of 5, height of 5. So we'll do the same thing for the icon that's going to be on the right hand side. So we'll just paste that underneath here. So we're going to say this time I'm going to check if the icon position is at the right hand side. Then I'm going to render this. And then finally, we're going to add some Tailwind classes to this button. Okay, now the Tailwind class is going to be very long, but the good thing is that remember that we are creating a reusable component. So we're only going to write the Tailwind classes once. Okay, now that's the beauty of React. So we're going to add some Tailwind classes to this. We'll make use of backticks because we're going to add in dynamic styles. First of all, I want to give this a px of a padding vertical of 3. We're going to do a bg linear to right. We want to add a linear gradient background to the button from the left hand side to the right hand side. Our start color is going to be blue 900 to purple 800, and then on over we're going to go to start from blue 800 to purple 700. We're going to give it a text of white, a font size of medium, transition of all, a duration of 300 milliseconds. As the transition is going to have a duration of 300 milliseconds. Also on hover, I want to give it a scale property. I want it to zoom out by 1.02, and also I want to add active. Give it a scale of 0.98. We'll give the button an inline flex property, items, center, justify, center, and then a gap of 2. So now we have to actually add the dynamic style. So what we are going to do is I'm going to add dynamic style right here. I'm going to say if the rounded property that is passed to this is true, if rounded is true, then we want this to have a rounded of full. Else it's going to have a rounded of LG. I'll just format this. Great. So now we have our reusable button. So let's actually use this reusable button. Now to use this button, we'll go back to our navbar up here. After this another list right here, we're going to output our button, our download button or download link tag right here. Then here, all we have to do is just call the link button component. I'll just call that right here. And now when we move on, it's going to say we have to pass in some props. Great, so let's actually do that. First of all, we want to pass in a href property. So now the href is actually going to point to your CV. Right now, inside this public folder, I have this document folder right here. Inside this document folder, I have this file right here, cv.pdf. Okay, now this is just a random PDF file. So right here, I'm going to say /documents/cv.pdf. The href of the link has to be the path to your CV. Okay, and the label or text is going to be download. So I spell that download correctly. Download CV. And then we're going to pass the download property. Okay, now we don't have to do download equals to true. By just passing that right here, it's going to actually default to true. Okay, this is the same thing as saying download is equals to true. Okay, we also pass the icon which is going to be an icon from React Icons called Lu download. And finally, we'll pass the icon position, which is going to be left. And that's all the properties we want to pass to this button, and we are getting an error. So I'm going to hover on that. We get property rounded is missing in type. Okay, great. So we've now actually specified that this is going to be optional because we don't want to pass this rounded property unless we want the button to be passed. Okay, so we're going to say this is optional, and that will get rid of that TypeScript error we are getting. So I'll just format this and I'll save that. I want to head back to our project. We should actually see that button right here. Okay, now whatever property will pass to this button right here, if I get rid of this CV and just use download, you're going to notice that we have just download. Okay, and also if I decide to get rid of the icon from this component, you're going to notice that we don't get any error, but we're not going to see the icon anymore. Okay, so with this now we have flexibility with this button because we've actually created a reusable button component or a reusable anchor tag or link tag component. Okay, so I just take this back. Now this is how we want our button to actually look, but we are not done yet. Now we do not want this button to be visible right here for small screen devices. We only want this button to be visible for large screen devices. Now what we could do is just add styles directly to the button, but since this is a reusable component, we cannot actually do that. So what we're going to do instead, we're going to wrap a div around this button. So I'm just going to wrap a div tag around this button, and then I can add some Tailwind classes to this button right here. By default, I'm going to give this button a display of id. Then for last screen, I'm going to give it a display of block. I'll save that. I want to head back to our project. We'll go to small screen device. You're going to notice that we can no longer see the button. We are only going to see the button for large screens. Great. Now, based on the fact that we set the download to true, now when we click on this download CV, it's actually going to download that cv.pdf file. So I'm going to click on this. I see that file actually gets downloaded. So now that we have the nav bar, let's actually start working on the mobile nav bar. I'm going to head back to Visual Studio Code. Inside this Navbar component, I'm going to create another component. I'll call this component mobile nav.tsx. I see. And this component is going to return an empty fragment. And in here, we're going to have two div containers. We're going to have one for the insert background or the background overlay. And then we have another div for the nav links. I get rid of this. Now, this mobile nav component is going to take some props. We have to specify the type. So we are saying interface mobile nav props. The property is going to be nav open, which is going to be of type Boolean. Okay, and then we can specify the type. It's going to be of type mobile nav props, and then we can destructure at the nav open. So now inside our Navbar component, we can actually import the mobile nav component in here. Down here, we're just going to call the mobile nav component, and now we have to pass in a prop called nav open. Now this nav open prop is going to be a state to know whether the mobile nav is actually open or not. So up here, we're going to create a state. Now before we do that, remember that we are making use of Next.js, so we have to convert this navbar to a client component to actually run client-side JavaScript. So up here, I'm going to say this is going to be a client component by using the Next.js directive use client, because by default, when you actually create a component or a page in Next.js, by default it's a server component. It's right here. It's going to be like this, use server, unless we specify that we want this to actually run client-side JavaScript. And then up here, we're going to create a state const nav open set nav open is going to be equals to, I'm going to get the use state hook from React. Okay, and by default this state is going to be false. And then after that, we're going to pass this state to this mobile nav component as a prop. So right here, I'll just copy this name right here. I'll say the nav open prop. I'll say nav open is going to be the state we just created. So we just pass it in as a prop. So now we're going to have access to this nav open state inside this mobile nav right here. So now we can actually start creating the mobile nav. Now these are the mobile nav is going to look like. You're going to see right here. When we click on this, it's going to actually pop out that mobile nav. And you can see right now that, and you can see that we have an overlay, a black overlay that's going to come out first before the nav links actually comes out. Okay, so let's actually do that. First of all, we're going to create a div for the overlay. So now I'm going to create a div. I'll give this a Tailwind class of, I'll use backticks here because we're going to add dynamic styles later. So first of all, I'm going with a position of fixed, insert of 0, give it a transform property, right of 0, give it a z index of 50, a background of black, reduce the opacity to about 30%, or the opacity of 30, a width of full, a height of a screen, a transition of all, a duration of 500 milliseconds. I'll save that, and now we can actually see this. So we'll go to this is obviously going to be present for large screen device now because we've not actually specified that we only want this to be shown for small screen device. Okay, so I'm going to reduce the screen size. You're going to notice that we actually see that black overlay on this page. Okay, after that, I'll create another list for the nav links. Give it a Tailwind class. Now this is also going to be, we're also going to be passing dynamic styles to this. So I just use backticks. I'll use a position of fixed, a display of flex, items, center, justify, center, text of white, flex of column, a height of full, transform, give it a transform property. I give it a transition of all, a duration of 500 milliseconds. Now we want the transition for this one to be delayed by 300 milliseconds. So we're going to pass in a delay of 300 milliseconds. We'll give it a width of 80%. For small screens and above, we're going to give it a width of 60%. A BG slate of 800. Space Y of 1. A Z of 80. White of 0 and a top of 0. I'll save that. Now inside this another list, we're actually going to output the list. So we're going to make use of the links we created inside this navbar.ts. So we just have to export this, so we can actually make use of this nav links array outside of this Navbar component. So right here I want to say export const nav links. So I'll go back to my mobile nav. So now I'm going to have access to that nav links inside this component. So I'll say nav links. So I'm just going to import that right here. You can say up here I'm importing nav links from /navbar. I'm going to map through the links, and for every time I map through the link, I'm going to call each of them a link, and then we're just going to return the JX. There's going to have an li tag in there, and then inside that li tag we're going to have a link. The href of the link is going to be link.url, and then the label of the link is going to be link.the label. So I'm going to add styles to the link itself. So I'll give this a Tailwind class, give it a display of flex, a justify of center, items center, a text of XL, a font of medium, a text of white, padding vertical of 4, padding horizontal of 6, a rounded of LG on hover. We'll give it a BG slate of 700, and then just reduce the opacity by 50%. And also on hover, we'll give it a text cyan of 300. We'll give the link a transition of all, a duration of 300 milliseconds. Give it a border bottom, a border of slate 700. I'll reduce the opacity a bit. Use a width of full, and finally we'll give it a text of center. So I'll save that. Let's actually check at the outputs and we actually see the links right here. Okay, and we get an error. I think we are getting this error because we've not specified a key. So I'm going to say the key is going to be the link dot the URL of the link. Okay, save that. And we actually see the links right here for mobile menu. Now, we don't want this to be open by default. We only want this to be open when a user clicks on that hamburger menu. It's going to be at the top right corner of the web page. It's going to be at the right hand side of the navbar. So let's actually add that hamburger menu icon. So we're going to head over to our navbar. I'll just scroll all the way down. After this download button right here, we're going to create a button tag. Inside this button tag, I'm going to call an icon called low menu. I give it a size of 30. I give this button some classes. Give it a width of 8, height of 8, cursor of pointer, a text of white, a z-index of 100, and most especially for last screen, we don't want this to be visible for last screen. Okay, so I give it a visibility of hidden. I'll save that. Now we'll go back there. You can actually see we see the hamburger menu icon, but when we go to last screen device, we can no longer actually see it. We only want it to be visible for small screen devices. Now, what we're going to do next is I'm going to add an onClick event handler to this button. So I'm going to say onClick. When someone clicks on this button, we want to run an arrow function that's going to actually set our nav open state to the opposite value, okay, which is opposite of the nav open, which basically means if the nav open is set to false, when the user clicks on this button, we're going to set it to true. And if it's true, when the user clicks on this button, it's going to set it to false. I'm basically toggling the state. So now that we have this, when we click on this button, you're going to notice that it doesn't really do anything. That's because inside our mobile nav, we've not actually added conditional styling to this mobile nav. So let's do that. So up here, I'll create a variable const show mobile nav is going to be equals to, if the nav open state is set to true, then this is going to be equals to translate x of 0, s is going to be equals to translate x of 100%. So now I'm going to copy this variable right here. I'm going to pass this to this class names right here as a dynamic variable. So right here, I'll just pass this right here. And also for the another list, I'll also just pass it right here. That's for the nav links. I'll save that. Let's test this out again. Now we'll go over there, we'll click on this. You're going to see it's going to slide in. Okay. Now when you click on it, it's going to slide back in. So now we're actually toggling the states by actually clicking on this button. But we are not done. When we click on this button, I want it to show like an X to show that the menu is actually open. And that's very, very simple to do. So we're going to go to the navbar.tss file. Now where we're actually rendering this loop menu, we're going to conditionally render this. So I'm going to check if nav is open. If nav open, then I'm going to render another icon called X, which I'm going to get from, I think it's called Lu X. Yeah, it's called Lu X. Which I also give a size of 30. Now, if the nav is not open, then we want to use this icon right here. Okay, I'll save that. Let's test this again. Now, I'll click on this. It shows that X icon. Click again, it's going to close it back up, showing the hamburger menu icon. Great job. Now, we're not actually done with navbar. You're going to notice that for the final project, when we scroll the navbar of the viewport, you're going to notice that it's going to actually change style. It's going to scroll, okay, to show that we're actually scrolling and the navbar is actually fixed, okay. So we actually want to implement this so that when we scroll, the navbar is actually going to change. The background of the navbar is going to actually change from transparent to this background color right here. So to do that, up here, we're going to create a state. Up here, create another state. Const. I'll call this state nav background. Then set function will be set nav background. It's going to be equals to the use state hook from React. And by default, it's going to be set to false. Now, you're going to notice that in the final project, when we scroll, we are not clicking on any button whatsoever. And this is actually different from this because for this one, when we click on this, that's only when we want to toggle the state. But for this one, we actually want to toggle the state without clicking on a button. So we need to actually add an event listener to listen for when we actually scroll. So when part of the web page actually scrolls off the viewport. Now, to actually add event listener in a React application, we make use of side effects. And to do side effects in a React application, we make use of the use effect hook. So down here, I'm going to make use of a use effect hook. Passing an empty dependency, because right here, when we pass in an empty dependency, which means this use effect is going to run once when the component maps. That's when the website opens for the first time. Then if we pass any variable, we pass to this as a dependency. Anytime that variable changes, the use effect hook is going to rerun. But in this particular case, we only want this to run once. So in here, we're going to create a function const nav handler it's going to be equals to an arrow function. In here, I'm going to say if window dot scroll y is greater than or equals to 90, then we want to set our nav background to true. Okay, show the nav background. Then also we want to say if window dot scroll y is less than 90 this time around, less than 90, then we want to set the nav background to false. So after the function, we're going to actually add the event listener. So I'm going to add an event listener to the window element. So say window.add an event listener. Listen for a scroll event. So when the page is scroll, we want to run this function nav handler like that. Now, note something. When we are adding event listener or subscription to a React application, you always have to return a cleanup for when the component unmaps. Okay, so when the user leaves the web page, you want to actually run a cleanup. Okay, the cleanup is that we want to actually remove the event listener. So to do that, down here, we're going to return an arrow function. Then in here, we're going to return window dot remove event listener. We'll call the event name, which is going to be the scroll. And then we'll pass in the function is listening for, which is the nav handler. Now, this is actually best practice in React. You always have to return a cleanup when you add an event listener or a subscription to your use effect hook. Now, right here, we're going to get rid of this static style. So I'll just get rid of this right here. I'll make use of backticks. Paste that right here. First of all, I'm going to give this a transition of up. Duration, I'm going to use 300 milliseconds. So now I want to add the dynamic style. So I'm going to say if the nav background is set to true, if nav background, then we're going to add some styles. S is going to be an empty string. We'll give this a BG slate of 900 and also a shadow of MD like that. I'll save that. So for now, we're not going to actually notice anything because we have no content to actually scroll through. So what I'm going to do, I'll go to the page.css file. I'll just give this h1 tag a height of something very large. I'll just do 2000 to a height of 2000 pixels. So we can have content to actually scroll through. Now, when we actually scroll, you can actually see it when you actually scroll off the viewport. Okay, great job. So with that, we are basically done with the nav bar. So now we can actually start working on the hero section. For the hero section, we are going to have these items right here, this image, this right here, this button right here. We're going to have this typewriting effect, and also we're going to have this really cool background right here. Now for that, we're going to create a new component. So I'll just close this up. I'll go to src component. Inside this component folder, I'm going to create a new component. Okay, so I'll create a new folder. I'll call this folder home. Close this general folder. Inside this home folder, I want to create a folder called hero. Okay, which is going to be all the components we need for the hero section. And then inside this hero folder, I want to create a file called hero section.tsx rfc. And now inside the home page, inside this page.tsx file, all we have to do is just create an empty fragment. And inside this empty file, we're going to call the hero section like that. And this hero section is going to return a section tag, return a section. and this section is going to have an ID that's going to be home. Okay, now this ID we are passing to this home has to match with this home right here in these links. Okay, so that's why when we click on a link, it's going to take us to the home section. Whenever we click on the link, we'll give this home section a Tailwind class of hScreen, a position of relative, display of flex, justify, center, items, so position is vertically center, overflow of hidden, finally flex direction of column. And then in here, we're just going to put something, just put a paragraph tag, just put something random so we can actually see it. I'll give you a test gray of 300. I'll save that. Now we'll go back to our project. We actually see that text right here. So our home section is actually in the web page. So I get rid of this paragraph tag. Then you're going to create a div. We're going to give this div a Tailwind class of absolutes. Now that's actually the reason we gave this section a position of relative, so that we can position this div absolute to this section right here. We'll give this a z of 10, a display of flex of call, and items of center. So the very first thing we're going to create is going to be the glowing image. That's what the first thing we're going to create. So I'm just going to create that. So now you create a div. I'll give this div a Tailwind class of width of 150 pixels, height of 150 pixels, and we're getting an error. Okay, we can just use the Tailwind method, which is going to be height of 37.5, which will, when we hover on it, it's still going to be of height of 150 pixels. Height 37.5 and width 37.5. And then we're going to give it a position of relative. So inside this div, we'll create another div, which is going to have a Tailwind class of absolutes, insets of 0, rounded of full, PG of linear, to right. To the right hand side, it's going to start from blue 500 to purple. So I spell that purple correctly, to purple 600. I give it a blur of LG. Animates is going to be pause, then I'll do opacity of 50. Okay, I'll save that. Now I'll head back to the web page. We actually see that circular glow right there. Okay, it's looking really, really good. So now we just have to place the image at the center of this blur right here. Let's do that. So after this div, I just format this. After this glowing div right here, we're going to create the image tag, create an image tag, which is going to get from next image, and then the src, and the src is going to point to one of the image I have inside this public folder right here, which is going to be this image.png right here. So I'm going to say /image.image.png like that, and then the author is going to be, I'll just use image. I give it a Tailwind class of rounded of full because I want it to be circular, an object of cover. And then finally, we have to pass in the field property, because if we don't pass in the field property, when I save this and I head back to the project, you can actually see we actually get an error. We've not passed a width and height property. Now, since we already gave the container that wraps around this image, which is this div right here, a width and height, and also give the position of relative, so we can just pass in an attribute called fill, which is basically telling the next image to actually fill the width and height of the container is actually in, since it's actually relative to that container. So I'll save that. Now we'll go back to the project. We actually see the image. Great job. Now after this div right here, I'm going to close this up. We're going to create a h1 tag, which is going to have this text in there. Hi, I am a web developer. Now this right here is basically us doing something like this. We're just doing something like this. That's what we are doing, but we are making use of HTML entities, because if we write it directly, it's going to throw us some errors when we try to actually build the application. So we're going to use HTML entities. So this is going to be, hi, I'm a web developer. And then I'm going to add some Tailwind classes to this. We'll give it a text of center, a text of 3XL. For small screens and above, we're going to give it a text of 4XL. For medium screens and above, give it a text of 4XL. Then for large screens and above, give it a text of 5XL. For medium screens and above, we're going to do 5XL and 4XL. Okay, so 3XL, 4XL, 5XL, and 6XL. Okay, because we want the text to actually be fully responsive regardless on the screen you are viewing this text on. After that, we'll do a margin vertical of 6, a font of bold, a tracking of wide, text of transparent. I want the text to actually be transparent. I'll give it a text of transparent. Also give it a BG clip text. So now I'm going to add a background. So do a BG linear to right. We'll start from indigo 500 to gray 300. So I'll save that. I'll check out the text and you actually see the text is looking good, but the text is positioned inside this image component. Why is that? Well, I think that's because we are placing it outside of this div. Okay, it's supposed to be inside this div. Okay, it's supposed to be inside this div, but outside of this glowing image, not outside of the absolute div. Okay, so I'll just place that in here. I'll save that. I should actually see the text right here. Hi, I am a web developer. Then so we're gonna add this text right here. Hi, I'm John, a passionate. Then we're gonna add this animated text that's gonna be animating in this typewriting effect. Now we're actually going to make use of a library for this, so let's actually work on this. So the way we're going to do this is that we're going to place this inside its own component because we don't want to actually cluster all this home section component. So I want to create a new component inside this hero. I'll create a component called animated intro .tsx rfc. Get rid of these imports. Now all we have to do is just call the animated intro inside this home section component. After this h1 tag, I just call the animated intro component like that. I'll save that and we should actually see that text right here, animated intro. So I want to head to the animated intro component. First of all, we have to actually install the library we actually need to actually animate the text. So I'll open up my terminal. I'll go to this other terminal right here. And then I'm going to npm install typewriter effect. Okay, you can see the name of the library right here, typewriter effect. I'll just click on enter. That command is going to install the library for us. Okay, great. So I'm just going to close this back up. I'll get rid of this text right here. I'll add some Tailwind classes to this div. I'll give it a Tailwind class of text of LG. Give it a height of 30, px of 8, a text of center. I want the text to be larger for small screens and above, so I'll give it a text of 2XL for small screens and above. Do a font of medium, a text gray of 400, like that. After that, I'm going to pass in this text in here. Hi, I am John, a passionate. Then down here, we're going to actually pass in the dynamic stuff. So we have to call the typewriter component. I just copy these and then up here, you can actually import that. Say import typewriter from typewriter effect, and then I'll just wrap a span around this component. So I'll call it span tag. I'll just paste that in here. I'll give this span a Tailwind class, a text indigo 400, and a font of bold. And then in here, we're going to pass in an options prop. And then inside this option, we have to pass in the array of strings we want to actually display, which is actually going to be this right here: Fullstack developer, Next.js developer, React expert, tech enthusiast, and UI UX designer. After that, we're going to pass in some properties. I'll say auto start. I'll set that to true. Loop. I'll set that to true. We actually want this to loop. Delay. I'll set it to 75. For the delay speed, we use 50. And then finally, I'm going to add a wrapper class around this. Okay, we can actually add our own Tailwind class to this component. I give it an inline block and a padding vertical of 6. I want to save this. Let's actually check out the output. And we actually get an error. We get an error right here. I think we're getting this error because with this typewriter effect component actually uses client JavaScript. And remember that this hero section is a server component. Okay, so we've not actually specified that I want to actually run client JavaScript in here. So to actually do that, we're going to convert this hero section to a client component. Now this is actually safe to do because even though we specify that this is going to be a client component, the static content of this page is still going to be rendered on the server. So up here, I'm going to say use client. I'll save that. Now, when we actually go to the web page, we see that right here. And when we go to the source code, you can see right now that we actually get those right here. You can see right now we have the a web developer right here. Okay. So the static content of the web page is still going to be rendered on the server. Okay, they're going to render from the server like an HTML document, which means we are still doing server-side rendering. Okay, regardless of its client, because the difference between making a Next.js component client and server is that when you say a Next.js component is a server component, which means it can run code from the server, okay, and render them as HTML documents, okay. And it can also do server-side rendering. But when you say it's a client component, it's still going to run code from the server and do server-side rendering. But after iteration, you'll be able to run client-side JavaScript. Okay, that's what we're actually doing when we say this hero section is going to be a client component. The contents are still going to be rendered on the server, but after the complete iteration, we can actually now run client-side JavaScript. But when we fetch data with that client-side JavaScript, that data is not going to be rendered on the server, it's going to be rendered on the client. So now we actually have the text animation and it looks really, really good. So finally, we're going to add the link button. Now this is going to be simple. We've already created this as a reusable component. So let's go to the hero section. Now all we have to do is that after our animated intro, just call a link button component. I just import that in, and now we have to specify the href, which is going to go to hashtag. It's going to have to match the link that's going to lead to the works or the project section. So I just head over to the Navbar. It has to match with this right here, this project right here. Okay, so I'll copy that. Then I'll just paste that right here. And then for the label or the text, it's going to be see my work. I want to pass in an icon, which is going to be blue arrow white. And now we are getting an error when we move on this download properties missing a tab. We want this to be optional, okay? Because in a case when we don't want this to be a download button, we just say this is going to be optional. Great, and that's going to get rid of the TypeScript error. I'll just format this. I'll save that. Now we'll head back to the application. We actually see our button, and I am not a fan of this icon. I don't like this icon. I'll just change this to far, instead of far big right, far blue arrow white. Okay, we get rid of this other one we imported. Save that, and this one is actually better. Now you can see now this icon is positioned on the left hand side, this one is positioned on the right hand side, and also this one is not circular. Remember I said that if we want to specify that this is going to be circular, then we're going to pass in a prop, called rounded, like that. Remember that rounded is this rounded, right? And same thing as doing rounded is equals to true, so we just pass it as rounded. I'll save that. Now when we go back to the application, you can see that the edge is actually circular. You can actually see the beauty of React. We just create the component once and we can use it as much time as we want. So now we are almost done with this. All that's left for us to do is to add our background. So let's do that. So I want to head to a website called reactbit.dev. You can actually see the URL right here, reactbit.dev. I want to search for background. So up here, I'll say background. I'll just search for particle backgrounds because I want the particles in background. I'll click on that. And it's going to bring us right here. And this is the background we actually want to implement in our application. Now, to actually implement this, we have to actually get the code, which is very easy to do. This is the code we actually need. There's actually two ways to install this. We can go the CLI route or the manual route. Now, I don't actually have SHA-CN CLI installed in my application, so I'm going to go the manual route, okay? So I just have to install this right here, install OGL. So I'll copy this right here. I'll head back to my Visual Studio Code. I'll just open up my terminal. Then I'll just paste that right here, npm install OGL. click on enter, and that's going to install that package for me. And then I just close this back up. And the next step is that I have to actually create a component. Okay, I have to create a component and actually place this code inside that component. So I'm just going to copy this code. I actually want the TypeScript version, which is already set to TypeScript. I just copy the code right here, and then I'm going to head back to Visual Studio Code. Inside this hero folder, I'll create a new file called particles.tsx, and then I'll just paste that code we copied right here. Great. I'll save that. So I'm going to go back to the documentation. The next step is that we have to actually place this CSS code right here inside our CSS. So I just copy these and I'll place this right here inside our globals.css. I'll just paste that in here. And finally, we just have to copy the component, which is going to be this component right here. I'll just copy this component. I'll head back to my code. I'll go to the use section and I'm just going to paste this up here. Just before this absolute, this div as absolute, I'll just paste it right here, and then we're just going to import particles from the particles file we created. Okay, just import particles in. I'll just format this. I'll save that. Now we'll go back to the web page and we have an error. Say cannot resolve module /particles.css. We'll just get rid of that module. We'll just go to particles.css. I'll just get rid of this. Okay, we don't need this actually. So I'll just go back there and we actually get our particles, and it looks really good. I'll just get rid of this text, save that, and we actually get this actually looking really good. So next we're going to start working on this what I offer section right here. First of all, just close all these files, close all. Then I'm going to create a new component. I'll create a new folder inside this home folder. I'll create a new folder called services. And inside the services folder, I'm going to create a new file called service, or a new component called service section.tsx rfc. And then all we have to do is just go to the app folder. Then in this page of TSS file, we're just going to import this service section component. And we should be able to see the service section component right here. Now inside the service section component, first of all, I'll get rid of this import. And also I'll get rid of this div right here. I want to pass in a section tag. And this section tag is going to have an ID that has to match the services we gave to the navbar. Okay, so I'm just going to go to that navbar component, general navbar.tss, which is going to be services right here. Okay, services. And then in here, first of all, I'm going to actually create the header for this section. So I'll say this is going to be the header. Now this is also going to be a reusable component because we want to make use of this header in various parts of this website. You're going to notice that we are using the header right here. We are using the header right here. We are using the header right here. And we are using the header in every section. We're going to make use of the header. So it doesn't really make sense for us to actually be writing similar CSS over and over again. We can just create a component we can actually reuse. So let's actually create another reusable component. So I'll go to this general folder. I'll just create a new component. I'll call this component header.tsx. Okay, RFC. First of all, we have to define the types of the props we're going to pass to this component. So up here, I'm going to say interface. So I spell that interface correctly. Interface header props. We'll pass in a prop called title, which is going to be of type string. And also we're going to pass in a prop called as, which is going to be optional, and it's going to be either h1 or it's going to be h2. Sorry, not this. Or it's going to be h2. So based on the tag we want to display, if we want to display h1 tag, we're going to pass h1. If we want to display h2 tag, we're going to pass in h2 as the as. And then in here, we can specify the type of the props as header props, and then we can destructure the title and destructure the as. We'll rename the as tag because we're going to make use of this in JSX, and by default it's going to be h1, which means if we don't pass any as value to this component, it's going to default to being an h1 tag. Now after that, I'm going to create a variable that we're going to use to actually style up the size of the tags, okay, depending on if it's h1 or h2. So I'm saying const size classes is going to be equal to an object. So we're going to say if it's h1, then the styles are going to be text of 3xl. Then for medium screens and above, it's going to be a text of 4xl. And if it's an h2 tag, then the style is going to be text 2xl. Then for medium screens and above, it's going to be text 3xl. And then it's going to return a div. I'll give this div some Tailwind classes. We'll give it a padding vertical of 14. For medium screens and above, give it a padding vertical of 20. A display of flex, a flex direction of column. And then inside this div, we're going to call the tag as a component. Okay. And then inside because this tag is going to be whatever we pass. If we pass an h1, this tag is going to be a h1 tag. But if we pass h2, the tag is going to be a h2 tag. Then inside the tag, we just render out the title and then add some Tailwind classes to this tag. We'll give it a font of bold, a tracking of wide, a text of transparent, a BG clip first. I'll give it a background of BG linear to the right hand side. We're going to start from indigo 500 to gray 300. And finally, we have to pass in this dynamic style, because if it's an h1 tag, then we're going to apply this style. But if it's a h2 tag, we apply this style. So this is going to be dynamic. So I just cut this off. And then I'm going to pass in the static styles. And then right here, I just say size classes. And then I'll pass in the tag. The tag. Great. To know which size classes to actually add. If it's h1 tag, it's going to apply this. If it's h2, it's going to apply this. I also rearrange this a bit. So now we have to do is actually use this component. So I'm going to go over to the service section. Down here, I'm going to call the header components. I'll just get that in, and we have to pass in a title. Now the title for this one is going to be what I offer. I'll save that. Now when we go back to our application, we should actually see that right here, what I offer. I want this to be aligned to the center. So what I'm going to do, I'll go over to the header component. I'll just give this tag a text of center. Give it a text of center to ensure it's actually aligned centered. And that's going to ensure it's actually at the center, text of center. So now whenever I want to use that header component, we just have to call the header and pass a title to it. And if we want an h2 tag, we just pass the has h2, okay, because it's going to default to being an h1 tag. Now next, we're going to create these cards right here. This is going to be very, very straightforward and simple. So I'll go back to Visual Studio Code. After this header right here, I'm going to create a div. We'll give this div a Tailwind class of width 90%. For small screens and above, give it a width of 80%. Give it an MX of auto, a display of grid, a grid columns of 1, grid colors of 1. For medium screens and above, give it a grid columns of 2. And then for extra large screens, we'll give it a grid colors of 4. And finally, I'm just going to add a gap of 20 between the items that are going to be in here. So next, we want to actually create those forecasts. So we have to create a reusable component. We're just going to reuse, because we don't want to create it multiple times and be adding Tailwind CSS multiple times. Okay, so what we do, we just create a component inside the service folder. I call this component service card.tsx rfc. Up here, you have to specify the data type of properties we want to pass to this component. So I'll say interface service card props. I'm going to pass an icon which is going to be a string, pass a name, which is going to be a string or a title, whatever you want to call it. And finally, we'll pass in a description, which is going to be of type string. Okay, and then right here, we can actually destructure our value, specify the type as service card props, and then we'll destructure add the icon. I'll pass in the name, I'll pass in the description, then I'll just format this, and then I'm going to return a JSX. I'm going to have a div in there. Inside that div, I'm going to have an image tag, which I'm going to get from next image, and then the src is going to be equals to whatever will pass as the icon. And then the auth text is simply going to be service. Let's call it service icon. After that, I'm going to pass in an h3 tag, which we're going to give a Tailwind class, margin vertical of 4, text of XL, medium screens and above, give it a text of 2XL, a font of bold, and a text gray 200. And then we just pass in the name prop in here. And finally, after the h3 tag, we're going to have a paragraph tag. I'm going to output the description. We'll give this paragraph tag a Tailwind class of text gray of 300. That's all. So now we can actually make use of this service card component inside our service section. So all we have to do, we just call a service card component, and then we have to pass in the props to pass in the name. This very first one, the name is going to be UI UX. The icon is going to be a path to the image. It's going to be /images/s1.png. And then finally, the last prop here, prop, is going to be the description. Just format that. So now we've actually passed all the data we need for this very first card. I'll save that. Let's actually check how it looks. And we have an error. It said image with SRC missing required width property. Oh, we didn't actually specify the width and height of the image because this is a Next.js image. So Next.js has to know the image. So I'll go to the service card components. Then I'll say the image is going to have a width of 60, a height of 60, like that. And we should actually see that card right here. And it looks really good. I'm just going to add the other cards. I'll go back to the service section. All we have to do is just drag this down multiple times. 1, 2, 3. And then we just update the VTAs. For the second one, the name is going to be this right here, web and mobile. The image is going to be s2.png. And then for the description, it's going to be this right here. For the next card, the name is going to be design and creative. The image is going to be s3.png. And the description is going to be this right here. The final card, the name is going to be development. The icon or the image is going to be s4.png. Then the description is going to be this right here. I'll save that. Let's actually check out the output and you actually see we have those cards right here. Okay. And the beautiful thing about this card is that they are going to be fully responsive. Okay. You're going to respond to the screen size. Now, but this gradient text is not actually applied the way we want it to be applied. For this one right here, this one you can actually see the gradient being applied. You know, I'm going to get rid of the text of center. Okay, I'll just get rid of that text of center. We're not going to align it at the text of center. What we're going to do is that we'll give this a display of flex and a justify of center. I'll save that. Yeah, you can actually see the gradient right now. It actually looks better this way. So now before we move on to creating the next section, there are some things I actually want to work on in this Navbar I actually forgot to implement. Now, when we go to small screen device, you're going to say when we open up this menu for small screen device, we don't actually see the download button. We want to actually see the download button right here, because for small screen device, when we actually hide this for small screen device, we don't actually have any download button to actually download the CV. And also, when we open up this sidebar menu, when we go to last screen, you're going to see we actually still see this for last screen. So let's actually fix that. So first of all, I'm going to go to the mobile menu. I'll go to the mobile nav. After this closing squiggly bracket right here, I'm going to call a button. I don't have to actually call, I just copy the one we did for the nav bar. So I'll go to the nav bar. I'll copy that button component, which is going to be this right here. And then I'll just paste that in here. Then I'll just import the button into this component and also import the icon. And I'll just format the document. So rearrange it a bit. Save that. And now we should actually see the download button right here. I'll just wrap a div around this so I can imagine to a button. So I'll cut off this button. I'll place it in a div. And then I'll just give this div a Tailwind class of margin vertical of 4. This is actually way better. Wait, I actually want to hide these for last screen devices. Remember that the button to actually open the sidebar menu, the nav links for the mobile menu, is going to be rendered to the UI for last screens and below. So, but for last screens and above, for screens that are 1024 pixels above, it's going to be hidden. So we have to do the same thing for the mobile nav. So I'm just going to copy this styles right here. I'll copy this. I'll go to the mobile nav. Then I'm going to add this right here. I'll add this to this Tailwind classes right here. Just basically wrap this. I'll paste that right here. I'll do the same thing for the links. Okay, I'll save that. Now, when we go over there, we'll go to last screen device. You're going to see that even though the menu is set to open, we are not going to see it for last screen devices. And now we can actually see we have this download CV button right here. And also remember that we actually reuse this component, which means when we click on this right here, you can see that the downloading is not going to work because we didn't pass the download props, but we actually did for this one because we are making use of a reusable component. And then finally, inside our navbar, when we added an event listener, we then returned a cleanup, and inside our return function, we are still returning again. Now we were supposed to just return this like this. Okay, this extra return was not supposed to be here. I actually made a mistake. It's also return window.remove event listener school, then the function name. I'll save that. So next, we're gonna work on this resume section. Okay, now on the left hand side of the resume section, we're gonna have this section, my education. On the right hand side, we're gonna have this, my work experience. So let's actually start working on this. So first of all, I'm going to create a new component inside my SRC folder, components folder. I'll create a new folder called resume. And inside this resume folder, I'm going to create a file called resume section.tsx. RC. Then I just get rid of these imports right here. And then we can just import this resume section inside our page.tss, our home page. So head over to our home page, and down here I'm just going to call the resume section like that. Great job. Then inside this resume section, I want to create a section. Create a section tag, which we're going to give an ID of resume, which has to match with this right here, resume. First of all, I'm going to add a Tailwind class to this section, give it a margin vertical of 12. And then here, I'm going to create a div tag, which I'm going to give a Tailwind class. We're going to give this a width of 90%. For small screens and above, we'll give it a width of 70%. I'll give it MX of auto, a display of grid, a grid cause of 1. For extra large screen, we're going to give it a grid cause of 2. Then a gap of 10, like that. Now remember, we're going to have two sections in this resume section. Okay, we're going to have the education section and the work section. So the first one is going to be the education section, and then the second one is going to be your work experience. This education section, this is where you're going to place all your education qualities, and also this work experience, you're going to place all your work experience. So in the education section, I'm going to create a div tag. Inside this, I'm going to call the header tag. The title is going to be my education. I'll save that. I'll check out the output. I'll just go to last screen device, and we actually see that right here, my education. But you can notice right now that this one is an H1 tag and this one is an H1 tag. Now, for this section, since these are like subheaders of this section, my education and my work experience, I want to make use of H2 tags, not H1 tags like we did in this service section. So remember that when we created our reusable component, we said that we can pass two tags to this h1 or h2 based on what we pass as the as, which is going to default to h1 if we don't pass any as. Right now, we want this to be h2 tag. So all we have to do, we can say as is going to be equals to, we have two options, h1, h2 is going to be h2. I'll save that. And then you can notice that this size is actually smaller than this h1 tag right here. And then after this header tag right here, we're going to create a div tag. We'll give it a Tailwind class of space y of 6. And then in here, we're actually going to output our card, our resume cards. Okay, so we're going to create another component, a reusable component. I'll call this component resume card.tsx. RFC. Get rid of this. Remember, first of all, we have to actually specify the type of the props we want to pass to this component. So up here, say interface resume card props. We're going to pass in a row, which is going to be of type string. We're going to pass in an icon, which is going to be of icon type from React icons. We'll pass in a date. This is going to be optional. It's going to be of type string. And then we're going to pass in a description, which is going to be of type string. And then right here, we can just structure the prop. First of all, specify the type. It's going to be of type resume card props. And then we'll just structure out the role, the icon, which we are going to rename icon because we want to make use of it as a component. And then the structure out the data and then the description. Just format this. And then this component right here is going to return a GXS. It's going to have a div in there. We'll give this div a Tailwind class of flex items stats space x of 6, a bg blue of 950/20, a padding of 4. For small screens and above, I'll give it a padding of 8. A rounded, I'm going to give it MD. Inside this div, we'll create another div. And this one is going to be the div that's going to wrap around the icon. So I'm going to give this a Tailwind class, a width of 10, a height of 10. For small screens and above, we'll give it a width of 14. And for small screens and above, give it a height of 14. A BG blue 950, a rounded of full, a display of grid, and a place items of center. Inside this div, you're going to call the icon as passed to the component. We'll give this a Tailwind class of width 6, height of 6. For small screens and above, we'll give it a width of 8. And for small screens and above, we'll give it a height of 8. And finally, there's gray 200. I'm going to save that. Now, I'm going to head over to the resume section. Then all we have to do in here, we're just going to call a resume card component. And now we have to pass in the props. The icon of pass is going to be blue graduation cap. And then for the role, it's going to be computer science degree. And then the description is going to be this right here. Now you can actually update all this with your own personal details, okay? And then we're going to pass in a date, not data. We call this data, not data. I'll go back to that resume card. It's going to be date, not data. Right here, just update that to dates. Then right here, it's not going to be data. It's going to be the dates, which is going to be this right here. So I'll just rearrange this. I'll save that. Now we'll go back to our application. We actually see the card right here. Okay, remember we already created the styles for the icon, so we actually see the icon. So it's already complete creating the component. So I'm going to go back to the resume card. After this div that wraps around the icon, I'm going to create a div which I'm going to give a Tailwind class of flex 1. And then in here, I'm going to say date. If there's a date, that's only when I want to render this right here. If the date is passed, that's only when I want to render this GXS. I'm going to have a paragraph tag. And inside that paragraph tag, I'm going to output the dates. And then we'll give this a Tailwind class. Margin bottom of 2, px of 4, py of 1, For small screens and above, I'll give it a PY of 1.5, a rounded of full, a BG gray of, sorry, spell that gray correctly, a BG gray of 300, test gray of 700, a width of feet, a text of XM, and small screens and above, I'll give it a text of LG, and finally fonts. We're going to do bold. Now after this, I'm going to create a paragraph tag, which we're going to output. I'm going to output the row, and then I'll give this some Tailwind classes. Text gray 200, text of XL for small screens and above, give it a text of 2XL, a font of semi-bold, and a tracking of wild. After this paragraph tag, I'll create another paragraph tag, which we're going to output the description. And then also give this some Tailwind classes, a text of XM for small screens and above, do a text of base, margin top of 3, text gray 300, and the tracking of wild. Okay, save that. And now we'll head back to our application. We should actually see the component right here. And you see it looks really, really good. So now we just have to add the other details. I'll just format this to rearrange it a bit. Add back to the resume section. And this description prop is not actually spelled correct. Let me do that inside this resume card. It's not description. It's going to be description. And then here, just update it to description. And then in here, instead of saying description, we just say description. So now we want to create more cards. So all we have to do is just copy this and drag this down multiple times. 1, 2. And then we just have to update the details. Now I've actually updated the details to actually save us some time. Okay. Now this one, the icon is loop book open. Then the row relevant coursework description. You can see the description right here. And for this one, the last one for the education section, Lou award, then you actually see the text. So you should actually update this with your own personal details. So I'll just save this and I want to go back to our application. We actually see those cards right here. And now the beautiful thing about this is that when we want to create the section for the work session, we don't have to recreate these cards. We're just going to reuse these cards and also reuse this header. So I'm going to head over there. Now here, I'm going to call a header component. Passing a title, which is going to be my work experience, and then we want to display this tag as an H2 tag. Now I want to save this and go back to the application. You can actually see we have the second header right here, my work experience. Great. So I go back to our Visual Studio Code. Now I'm going to wrap this entire item inside a div. Okay, I have this header inside a div. So inside this div, I'm going to actually create another div, which I'm going to give a Tailwind class of space y of 6, and then inside this div, we're going to output a resume card. Okay, so we're just going to copy one of these, and then I'll just paste that in here. Now this one, the icon is going to be our Next.js field, and then the row is going to be front-end developer. And then for the description, this is going to be this right here. And then we can get rid of the date. We don't need the date for this component. I'll save that. And now we'll go back to our application. We actually see that card right here, front-end developer. So now I'm going to add more cards to this. Now I've added 2 more cards. So this one is going to be backend developer. It's going to be Fullstack developer. You can actually see the icon, Lou package and Lou server. I'll save that, and when we go back to our application, we actually see this section right here, and it looks really good. And now when we go to small screen device, you're going to notice that these are actually fully responsive. They are looking really, really good. I'll just change the text color of this. So instead of using text of white, go to the resume card for the paragraph tag. I'll use a text gray of 400 instead. Yeah, it's actually better. It actually looks better this way. So next, we're going to start working on this project section, okay, where you can actually output your project. That's the previous projects you have actually worked on or your personal project. So I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to close everything up here. I'll close all. Then I'll create a new folder. Inside my components folder, I'll create a new folder called projects. Inside this project folder, I want to create a new file called project section.tsx rfc. Just get rid of this, and then in here we're going to return a section tag, which is going to pass in a ID property that's going to say projects, and this has to match with the navbar. What we actually specified in our navbar is going to be project. Inside this section, we're going to output our header, which I'm going to import in, and then the title is going to be recent. I'll save that, and now all we have to do is actually import this project section component in our home page. So I'll go to app page.tss. Now right here, I'm just going to call the project section like that. I'll save that, and we should actually see that recent project header right here. Now after, go to the project section component. After this right here, I'm going to create a div, which I will give a Tailwind class, a width of 80%, mx of auto, display of grid cause of 1. For medium screens and above, do a grid cause of 2, a gap of 10, and also do an overflow of hidden. And this overflow of hidden, I'm actually adding this for the animation we're going to add in the future, because the animation for this recent project is only coming from the left and from the right. So that's why I'm actually adding this overflow of hidden right now. Now inside this div right now, we actually want to output the project cards. Okay, so just like we did with the resume section, we're going to actually create reusable cards too. So I'll go to my project folder, create a new file called project card.tsx rfc. You have to specify the props it's going to accept. So up here, say interface project card props. The first property we're going to pass is going to be the image, which is going to be a string, and then we're going to pass in a title, which is going to be of type string, and then finally we're going to pass in a description that's going to be of type string, and then we're going to say these props are going to destructure are going to be of type project card props, and then we're going to destructure the image, the title, and also the description. And then this is going to return a JSX. I'm going to have a div in there. Inside this div, we're going to have an image tag, which we're going to get from next image. The src is going to be the image, because you're going to pass in an image. Let me just call this image path. This is actually a better name than just image. Just say image path. Okay, so the src is going to be the image path, and then the auth test is going to be project image, and then I give it a width of 800, a height of 600, and finally I just give it a Tailwind class of 100 lg. Format this, and now after this image tag, we're going to have a paragraph tag. We're going to output the title of the card. I'll give this some Tailwind classes. Imagine vertical of 4, a text of XL. For small screens and above, give it a text of 2XL, font of semi-bold, and a text gray 200. After that paragraph tag, we're going to output another paragraph tag, which we're going to output the description, which we're going to give a Tailwind class. Give it a font of medium and a text gray of 400, like that. Just format this. Great. So now we have our reusable card components. Let's actually use these components. So go to our project card. All we have to do now is just call a project card component. So say project card. I'll just import that in, and now we have to pass in a title. For this one, it's going to be modem dashboard UI. Then the image path is going to be /images /p1.webp. And finally, I'm going to add a description, which is going to be this right here. So I'll save that. Now we'll head back to our project. We actually see that project card and it looks really, really good. So now I'm going to add more of this card. Now I've actually added more of this card. The second card is going to point to p2.webp, modern education website. You can see the description here. The third card is going to point to p3.webp, modern landing page. You can see the description. Also, the last card is going to point to p4.webp. You can see the title, modern SaaS website, and the description. So I'm going to save this and then we'll head back to our project. You can actually see the cards, the project cards, and they look really, really good. And then we'll go to small screen device. You can see how fully responsive this actually looks for mobile devices. Great job. So the next section we're going to work on is going to be this my skills section. Okay, so let's work on this. So I'll go back to my Visual Studio Code. I'll create a new folder called skills. I'll just close this up. SRC components. I'll create a new folder called skills. So I didn't spell the skills correctly. And then inside this skills folder, I'm going to create a new component called skill section.tsx rfc. And then our page.tss file, I'm just going to call that skill section like that. And then inside this skill section, just get rid of these imports. We're going to return a section tag instead, which we're going to pass an ID, which has to match what we are using in our navbar. So I'll go to general navbar.tx, which is going to be skills, and it actually matches. So say skills. I'll give this skills section a Tailwind class of padding vertical of 16. And then in here, I want to call the header component. And I'll pass in the title, which is going to be my skills. Save that. And when I will go back to our web page, you should actually see that header right here, my skills. Now after this header component, we're going to create a div, which we're going to give a Tailwind class of flex, a flex of warp, justify content, justify center, and a gap of 6, like that. And then inside this div, you want to map through an array. So up here, I'm actually going to output an array. I'll paste an array right here. You can actually see the array right here. The name of the array is going to be skills, and each of these arrays is going to have object that is going to have a name key, icon key, and key level. Then I'm just going to import the icons. Import these from React icons. I import this from React icons. Import this from React icons. Import this from React icons. Import this from React icons, and also import this from React icons. I can actually just copy this array right here. You can actually see the values. The first one is the first one. This is the second one. Next.js, Node.js, TypeScript, and Tailwind CSS. I just pasted them here to really save some time. I'll save this. Now down here inside this div, you can actually map through this. So right here, I'm going to say skills.map. For what I'll map through a skill, we're going to call it a skill. And then we're going to return a JSX. Inside this JS, we're going to have a div, which is going to pass the key to. So the key is going to be this key. I'll just use the index of the item. So I'll get the index of the item. And then I'll say this key is going to be the index. Okay. Now when I say the index of the item, I mean the index of the item right here, because in this array right here, each of these objects have an index number. This one is an index of 0. This one is an index of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. Okay, remember computers start counting from 0, so we're going to start from index 0 like that. Okay, so each of them have their unique index. So we're going to make use of that index as the key. And then I'll give this div some Tailwind classes, a bg slate of 900, a text of center, a width of 40, height of 48, a rounded of 3xl, display of flex direction of column, items, center, justify, center, shadow, LG, transition, and hover, give it a scale of 110. And inside this div, I'm going to create another div which will give a Tailwind class of text 5XL and a text gray of 300. Okay, and inside this div, all we just have to do is output the icon. So I'll say skill dot icon like that. And after this div, I'm going to output a paragraph tag which I'm going to give a Tailwind class, text of 2XL, a font of semi-bold, margin vertical of 4, text gray of 200. Then in here, we're just going to output the skill level. And then finally, we're going to add another paragraph tag. We're going to output the skill dot the name of the skill. And we'll give this a Tailwind class, text indigo 500, and a font of semi-bold. I'll just format this. Great job. And now we should actually see this in the web page. So I'm going to go back there and we actually see this right here. Okay, and we didn't add the percentages to the numbers. So after this skill level right here, just add a percentage sign right there. Okay, great. You can see it actually looks really good. And when we go to small screen device, this is actually fully responsive too. So next, we're going to actually create this very simple and clean testimonials section. So I'm going to create a new component. So I'll create a new folder called testimonials. Inside this testimonials folder, I'm going to create a new file called Testimonials Section.tsx. I'll see. Get rid of these import statements, and then we just have to call this testimonial section inside this page.tsx file. Then I just call it testimonials section like that. And inside this testimonial, the first thing we're going to do, we're going to create a section tag which we're going to pass the ID as testimonials. I'll check if it matches this testimonials. Okay. Now first of all, I want to create a div in here. And inside that div, I want to call our header components, and I pass in a title that I'm going to call testimonials. Save that, and we should actually see that testimonial header right here. Now after that, I'll create another div. Now this div will give a Tailwind class of display of grid cause of 1. For small screens and above, a grid cause of 2. For large screens and above, a grid cause of 3. And then I'll give it a gap of 8. In here, we're actually going to map through all the list of testimonials we have. Okay, so up you're going to create an array of testimonial objects like we did with the skills. Okay, so you have the first testimonial, the second testimonial, and the third testimonial. And you can actually hard code this right now. And this is the first one with the name, the role, the content, the rating, and the image. And this is the second one with the name, the role, the content, the rating, the image. And then this is the third one. And then down here, we can actually map through this array. So I can say testimonials dot map. Anytime we map through, we call each of them a testimonial. And then we're going to return a div that the key, I just get at the index. Then I'm going to make use of that index of the item, the index of the item as the key. We're going to give this div a Tailwind class, bg gray 800, give it a border gray of 700, a rounded of XL, a padding of 6, and a shadow of LG. Then inside this div, the very first item we want to create in this testimonial card is going to be the stars. Now for that, you're going to see right now that we're going to have 5 stars, okay, and the stars is going to be filled depending on the style we actually apply. So let's actually do this. So I want to create a div in here, which I'm going to give a Tailwind class of flex, items, center, and a margin bottom of 4. And then in here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to map through an array, create an array I can map through, array. It's going to be an array of 5, map is going to be an unused variable, and then we're going to get the index. And then here we're going to put an icon called far star, which we're going to get from React icons. And then we have to pass in a key, which is going to be the index. Save that. Now we'll go back to our application. We actually see those stars right here, okay? Those 5 stars right here, okay? Because we said this is going to be an array of 5. Now, if we change this to 7, or let me use 8, I'm going to notice that the stars are actually going to be 8, depending on the value you actually passed right here. And you can notice that the cats are actually getting to the edges of this section. So I'm going to add more styles to this. Up here, I'll give this a width of 90% for small screens and above. I give it a width of 80%. I give it a MX of auto, margin top of 12. I'll save that. And now this is actually going to look way better. Now we actually want to add golden background to the stars based on the value we have right here. 5, 5. This is going to be 5 star, 5 star, this is going to be 4 star. Let's actually do that down here. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to add conditional styling to the icon. I'll give the icon a Tailwind class. I'm going to make use of backticks. I'm going to add dynamic styles to this. First, I'm going to add some static style, width of 4, height of 4. Now, add some dynamic style. I'm going to say if the index is less than testimonial.written, then I want this to be displayed a text yellow of 400 and a few yellow of 400. As we're going to give it a text gray of 300. I'll just format this, save that. And now we'll go back to the web page. You can see right now that this one is has 5 star yellow, then this one yellow, then this one that has 4 star, has rated 4 stars, just 4 stars. Then if we change this to, I'll use 3, we should see right here that this one is going to be 3 star. After this D for the rating, then I'll create a paragraph tag. Right here, we'll say ampersand L D Q O, and then we're going to output the content right here, and then we're also going to output this quotation right here. And in here, you can simply say testimonial dot the content. We'll give this paragraph the attribute class of italic. I want the text to be italic. Imagine bottom of 6 and the text gray of 400. After that, I'm going to create a div. I give this div some Tailwind class. I'll give it a display of flex, items, center, and a gap of 3. In here, we're going to create a div which is going to wrap around the image tag. Give it a Tailwind class of relative, a width of 10, a height of 10, rounded of 4. And then here I'm going to call an image tag. Get that from next image. The SRC is going to be testimonial dot the image, okay, which is going to point to the part of the image in our folder, in our public folder. And then we'll pass an auth test called testimonial pic. Give it a Tailwind class of object cover rounded of full. And finally, since we already gave the container that wraps around the width and height of 10, we can just give this a flip pop thing. Rearrange this a bit. I'll save that, and we should actually see that right here. We actually see the image right here, and we actually see the testimonial context too. After the div that wraps around the image, I'll create another div we should give a Tailwind class of padding vertical of 4, and then in here we have put a h4 tag, which is going to output this testimonial.name, and then we're going to give this some Tailwind classes, a font of bold and a text of white, like that. After that, we're going to make use of a paragraph tag, and we're going to output testimonial.row. Then I give this a Tailwind class of text xm first gray of 400. Save that, and we actually see the testimonial cards, and they are actually going to be fully responsive too. Great. So the final section we're going to work on is going to be the contact section right here. We're going to have this info on the left hand side, and we're going to have this contact form at the right hand side. So first of all, we're going to create a new folder. I'll create a new folder inside my components. I'll call this folder contacts, and then inside this contact, I'm going to create a new file called contacts section.tsx rfc. Get rid of this import statement, and now we just have to import this section component inside the home page. So I'll say contacts section, just import that in. Okay, then inside this contact section, we're going to create a section tag, which we're going to give an ID of contacts, which matches this right here. And then I'm going to give this section a Tailwind class a padding vertical of 16, and for last screens and above, I'll give it a padding vertical of 30. And then in here, I'm going to create a div, which we're going to give a Tailwind class of width of 90%. For medium screens and above, we'll give it a width of 80%. MX of auto, I'll give it a display of grid, a grid cause of 1. Spell that grid correctly. For last screens and above, give it a grid cause of 2, a gap of 6, and for last screen also, we're going to give it a gap of 12. Now remember, we're going to have two sections, the DTA section and the contact form section. So first of all, let's create the DTA section. I'll create a div for this, and in here I'm also going to pass in a h2 tag. Now for this particular h2 tag, I'm going to make use of that reusable header. Right here, I'm going to output this text right here, ready to collaborate. And then for the Tailwind classes, we'll make use of the styles we use inside this header right here, this tag right here. Okay, but we don't want to apply. Now we have a div around this tag. Okay, this py of 4, py of 20. We don't want to apply this padding to that h1 right here. That's why I'm not reusing that header component. I'm using a h2 tag, and then I'll just copy the styles we have here. Copy this, and then I'll just paste that. Give this a Tailwind class. I'll paste that right here. I give this a padding vertical of 3, a text of 3XL, and for medium screens and above, give it a text of 4XL. I'll save that. I will go back to the web page. We should actually see that text ready to collaborate right here. After this h2 tag, I'm going to output a paragraph tag, which is going to have this text in here. I'm currently available for freelance work. You can actually update this to whatever you actually want. And I'll give this a Tailwind class, first gray 400, margin bottom of 10, a text of base. For large screens and above, give it a text of LG, and a leading of relaxed. Okay, save that, and we should actually see that text right here. So next, we're going to create this right here. So what we're going to do, we're going to place this inside an array so we can actually map through these details. So up here, I'll paste an array called content info. Okay, that's going to have these 3 objects in here. Okay, the icon, the title, the value, the link, and each of them has those keys. And then we'll just import the icons right here. And also the icons already have a class name, okay, width of 6 and height of 6. And then after this paragraph tag right here, we'll create a div that will give a Tailwind class space y of 5, and the margin bottom of 12. And then in here, we're going to map through the content info. So say content info dot map. Anytime I map through the content info, just call it an item. I'll get the index of the item, and then we're just going to return a JSX. It's going to be Next.js link tag. The href, first of all, just get this link from NextLink. The href is going to be item dot link, and we obviously have to pass in a key. Don't forget that, which is going to be the index of the item. And then inside this link, and also we're going to give it a Tailwind class of group, display of flex, items center, gap of 4, px of 2, py of 3, transition of colors, and hover. I'll give this a BG white as 5% transparent, and also a rounded of LG. And inside this link, we're going to have two divs. One is going to wrap around the icon, so let's actually create that one first, which will give a Tailwind class of height 15, width 15, rounded of full, a BG of white with 5% transparent, a text of white, a transition for transform. Then on group over, we'll give this a scale of 105. Now with this group over, this is what we're actually doing. When we hover on the card, we don't have to hover on the icon. When we hover on the card container, you're going to notice that the icon in there is actually going to zoom out. When we hover on the card, that's why we're actually adding that group property. So we're going to say group over skin, and that's why we added a group property to the parent wrapper, okay, which is this link. And then inside the div, we're just going to put the item dot icon like that. I'll rearrange this a bit. I'll save that. And now we'll go back to our application. We actually see the icons right here. You can see the icon actually zoom out when we hover on the link. But now we want these icons to be positioned in the center. So what we're going to do, we'll give this a display of grid and a place the items at the absolute center. That should ensure that we have these icons at the center right here. Great job. After this div, I'm going to create another div down here. In here, we're going to have a h4 tag. I'm going to output the item dot the title of the item, and then I'll give this some Tailwind classes. I'll give it a text of MD, a font of medium, and a text of white. After this h4 tag, I'm going to add a paragraph tag. We're going to output the item dot value. I give this a Tailwind class of text MD and a text gray of 400. I'll save that, and we actually see how good is actually looking. So after that, I want to create the contact form. So I'm going to wrap up this part right here. I'll just wrap this up. After this div, I'll create another div. This is going to be for the form. Inside this div, we're going to create a form tag. We don't need the action attributes. I give this form tag a Tailwind class of rounded LG, a BG slate 900, PX of 4, and PY of 8. Now in here, we're going to have an input tag. It's going to be of type test, and then the placeholder is going to be your name. Then I'll give this a Tailwind class, PX of 4, PY 3.5, margin vertical of 4, a BG slate of 800, outline of none, a rounded of MD, a width of full, first gray 200, and a placeholder gray of 400. I'll save that. and we actually see the input right here. But I still feel this is actually too wide for large screens. So what I'm going to do is that I'll go back up here. We are giving this a width of 90% for small screen. For medium screen and above, we're giving it a width of 80%. So for large screen, I'll just give it a width of 70%. See if that this actually looks better for large screen devices. But when we go to small screen device, it still looks really, really good. And I'm going to pass in an attribute called required to this because we want this to be a required input. And then we're just going to drag this multiple times, actually create more of this input. This on the placeholder is going to be your email. For this one, it's going to be subject of message. I'll save that. I actually get the input right here and they look really good. So now we're going to add the test area. So after this last input, we're going to add a test area. I'll use a self-closing tag. The placeholder is going to be message. It's also going to be required. And the styles are also going to be similar to this right here. Now, instead of just rewriting these styles, you know what we're going to do? We're going to place this style in a variable. That way we don't have to rewrite this Tailwind CSS classes. Just cut this off. I'll scroll up here. I'll create a variable. Right here, I'll create a variable const input styles. It's going to be equal to this styles we just copied right here. Okay, const input styles is going to be equal to this. Now down here, instead of us writing this code 4 times, since we're actually writing the same, basically the same styles, we're just going to output the input styles. Okay, great. And when we go back to the web page, you can see that this one is actually still styled. So what we're going to do instead is I'm going to copy this code, and then instead of this class name right here, I just get rid of this. I'll place this right here. And same thing, instead of this right here, I'll place this right here. And then for this, instead of adding a new class name to this, I'll place this right here. Okay, then I'll just format this. And you can see right now, this is actually cleaner. They're actually writing all the styles over and over again. And now we'll go back to the application. We still see the input and they are still styled accordingly. So that's what we want to do is that I want to add unique styles to this, so to actually get rid of this resize. So I'll go back to the text area. I'll just get rid of this for now. Then I'll use backtick and I'm going to add it dynamically. So I can add some static styles. I'll give it a resize of none. I'll save that. And now when we go back to our application, we don't actually see that anymore. Then finally, I'm going to increase the rows a bit. So I'll give this a rows. I want 5 rows. Now that's going to actually expand it to 5 rows. Great job. So now all we have to do is just create the submit button. And that's very simple. After this text area, I'm going to create a button tag. And this button is going to be of type submit. But we don't have to actually do that because by default, when we create a button tag, is of type submit. I'll give this a Tailwind class width of full bg linear to white. Start the gradient from blue 900 to purple 800 and hover from blue 800, then hover again. It's going to go to purple 700. Give it a text of white, a font of semi-bold, padding vertical of 4, rounded of LG, transition of all, display of flags, items of center, justify center gap of 2, cursor of pointer. When it's disabled, give it a cursor not allowed. And when it's disabled again, the opacity is going to be 70. And then inside the button, we're going to add an icon called send, which we're going to get from React icons. The size is going to be 20, and then after that we're going to pass in a text called send message, like that. Rearrange this, save that, and we should actually see the button right here, send message. We are done with the contact section. I want to go to small screen device. You're going to see that this is actually fully responsive. So next, we're just going to create that footer, which is very, very simple. So I want to create a new component. Inside this components folder, inside this general folder, I want to create a new component called footer.tsx rfc, and this is just going to return a footer tag. I get rid of this import right here. We'll give this footer tag some Tailwind classes. Give it a border of top, a border slit of 800, and a padding vertical of 10. So this footer tag, I'm going to create a div, which I'll give a Tailwind class of px of 4, a text of center, first gray of 500, and a text of xm. And then inside this div, first of all, I'm going to use this HTML entity at copy to output the copyright, and then I'm going to say new date is going to be dynamic dot get full year, and this is just a JavaScript function to actually get the current year. Then after that, I'll say John developer portfolio. I'll save that. And now all we have to do is just import this footer component in our layout file. So I go to the root layout file, I just scroll the way down, and down here I just call the footer. I'll save that. And that should ensure that we actually have a footer right here. But I don't want it to have a text of white. I want it to have a text gray. Text gray. Okay, 500, not 50. 500. Yeah, it's way better this way. Great job. So now we have completely created the UI of the website, and everything looks really, really good. So next, what we're going to work on is I want to actually add animations. Okay, so we want to actually add our animations now. So to do that, we're going to make use of a library. We'll make use of a library called animate on scroll. So I want to head over to my web browser, search for AOS, which is animate on scroll. I'll just click on the very first link we're going to find, which is going to be this right here, and that's going to actually bring us right here. Okay, and now we can actually see all the animations we actually want to add. You can see you have fade up, you have fade down. I can see that the fade up is actually going to be a fade up, fade down, fade right, fade left, fade right up. I can see all the animations we actually want to add. I'm just going to scroll to the very end, so you can see how to actually install this. So we have to run npm install AOS, which I'm going to copy this command. I head back to our project, I open up this terminal. Then I'll just paste that command right here, npm install animate on scroll. Click on enter. And that's going to actually install that animate on scroll package for us. So I'm going to close this back up. So let's actually set this up. Now, to actually set this up, we're going to go to our page.tss file. Now, this is where we have to actually set it up, because we want all these sections right here to have access to the animation library. But to actually set up the animation library, we are going to be making use of use effect hook to actually initiate the instance of the animation library for when the component mounts. And if we have to make use of a use effect hook in this page.tss file, we have to make our entire home page a client component, which is not bad, considering the fact that we are not actually fetching any data from the server, which means our static code we've written and the static code we've written in all these sections are still going to be rendered on the server. But in practice, it's not actually a good practice to make your entire page client page in Next.js. So what we are going to do instead, we're going to create a layout file, and then we're going to make that layout file a client component. They're going to have all these components with that layout file. And that's the modern way for you to actually set up such a library in Next.js. So let's actually do that. So first of all, I'll create a new folder. I'll call this folder layouts. And inside this layout folder, I'll create a component called animation layout index.tsx rfc. Now remember that this component right here, we're going to use this component to wrap around the components in our home page. So which means it's going to have access to a prop called children. And then we're going to specify the type of this children, which is going to be, the children is going to be of type React node. And then this is just going to return an empty fragment where we're going to pass the children right here, which means when we wrap this around this component right here, all these components are going to be rendered where we have these children right here. And now we can easily just make this layout file a client component, use client, while preserving this home page as a server component. And to initiate the library, I'm going to go over to the documentation, go to view on GitHub, and just scroll down. And after we install this for you, and you have to actually import this tool right here. Just copy this right here, then I'll paste that up here. And now we have an error over on this. Say AOS is declared as file in the library. It could not. Okay, that's because we have to actually install the type. Since we are making use of TypeScript, the library was not built with TypeScript, so we have to actually install the type. So I just copy this. Alright, so the terminal, just open this up and I'll paste that right here. After that package is installed, you're going to notice that the TypeScript error is actually gone. I'll just close up this terminal back. So the next step is that we actually want to initialize the animate on scroll for when the component mounts. I want to run ros.init. Now remember that the only way to actually run a code when the component mounts is by using side effects. And to use side effects in a React application, we make use of use effect hook. So in here, we're going to create a use effect hook. Make use of the use effect hook. And we only want this to run once when the component mounts. We'll pass an empty dependency right here, which means this use effect hook is going to run only once when the component mounts. In here, I'm going to create a function const initialize animate on scroll. I'll call it init AOS. It's going to be equals to an arrow function. This function is going to be async, or we actually want to await in here. In here, we're going to say await import AOS. Now, since this is going to be making use of await, we have to make this function an async function. And then after that, we're going to say AOS dot init. I want the duration of my animations to be 1000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. And the easing, I'll use ease. We only want this to run once. Okay, so I'll say true. Then the anchor placement, I want it to be top center. Okay, now if you're wondering what this anchor placement means, it means when the animation is going to start. When we place an animation on a container on a div, we want this right now. This is going to be the animation is going to start when the top of the container gets to the center of the web page. If we do top bottom, the animation is going to start when the bottom part of the div gets to the center of the web page. We want the anchor placement for animation to be top center when the top part of our div gets to the center of the web page. And then finally, we're going to call this function now here. So I'll say init AOS. So now we have the animate on scroll initialized. All we have to do is go to the page.tss file and wrap all these components right here with this layout file right here. So in here, I'm going to say an animation layout. And then we'll cut all these components and then we're going to place those components in here and then get rid of these empty fragments. We don't need that. I'll format this. Now that we've wrapped this component with this layout file, these components right here, all these components right here are going to be rendered where we have these children right here, which means they are going to have access to this, animate on scroll instance we created right here. Now let's actually start adding animations. So I'll just first for close all. I'll start with the home section. I'll go to SRC components, go to the home the whole section actually. Now to add the animation is very simple. I'm going to add it first to this glowing image container right here. So all we have to do is just say data animate and scroll. I'll say fade up like that and save that. Now we'll go back to the web page. You can see that we no longer see that right here, but when I refresh, it's actually going to fade up, and you see how easy it is to actually add this animation. I'll refresh again, it's just going to fade up. Great job. And I also want to add animations to this one, but we want the animations for these ones to delay. We want this one to come into the screen first, then this one, then this one. So let's do that. We are basically going to do the same thing. So I'll just copy this right here. I'll have this back up. And then for this H1 right here, I'm going to paste that right here. Okay, fade up. We want this H1 to actually fade up after the image fades up. So for that, I'm going to add a data AOS delay of 200 milliseconds. I'll save that. And now you're going to notice that the image is going to actually fade in first, and then the text is going to fade. The I am a web developer is going to fade in next. You can see that again. See how cool that actually looks. So let's going to add animation to this one right here. Now all we have to do, we're just going to go to the component right here where we have this div right here inside this animate intro. Then since this animate intro is inside this hero section, and this hero section has access to data OS animation, this component is also going to have access to it. So just paste that right here, data AOS fade up, and then pass in a delay, a data AOS delay. I'll use 400 milliseconds. I'll save that. I'll refresh the web page, and you can see right now that this is going to look really, really good. Now for this button right here, it's actually going to be a bit tricky. Remember that this is actually a reusable component. So we want to pass animations to the div. We cannot pass animation to the component. So first of all, we want to specify that in this link button, we want to add animation to it. Okay, so I'm going to go to the link button component. I'll pass in types for animation. So up here, I'm going to say AOS animation. So these types we want to pass are for AOS animation. Then down here, it's going to receive a pop called animate, which is going to be optional. It's going to be Boolean. It's going to be optional because the other buttons, the other link buttons are not going to need animation. So we only want this to be optional for the button that actually needs animation. And after that, the animation type or AOS type is going to be of type string. And finally, the AOS or animation delay is going to be type of number. And then we can actually destructure out those props. First of all, destructure the animate, which by default is going to be set to false. And after that, the animation type is going to default to fade up, just in case we don't pass any animation type. And then the animation delay is going to default to 0 and a comma here. And now these also are going to be optional, okay, because the animations, all the animation properties are going to be optional. So now what we can do is I'm going to add the animation to this link tag right here. So right here, I'm going to say ... animate. If animate is true, only then do we want to add these attributes to this link. Data AOS as the animation is going to be whatever will pass, which is going to be the animation tab, the AOS tab, and then the data AOS delay is going to be the AOS delay we actually pass to it. Format this. So now we can actually make use of this in this AOS section. So we just pass in the AOS tab, which is going to be fade up. But if we don't pass this AOS tab, it's still going to be fade up. It's going to be fade up because the default value is fade up. And then the AOS delay is going to be, I use 600 this time around. I think this one is actually 600. This one is 400. Yeah, so this one is going to be 600. And then finally, we have to pass animate as true. So just call animate, which is the same thing as animate is equals to true. So I'll save that. And now we'll go back to the application. We'll refresh. You can see the button actually animates in, but this button doesn't animate in because we didn't pass the animate prop to this one. Great job. So next we're going to add animation to this service cards right here. So we're going to go over to service section, SRC components. I can't actually find the service folder. Oh, we place the service folder inside the home folder, which is supposed to be the same for the rest, but it doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do, I'll cut this service folder. I'll just cut this off and place this inside the components folder. I'll just paste it inside this components folder. Okay, I'll just update all the imports. Save this, and we should actually see you can see the services folder inside right here. Great. So I'll go to the service folder, I'll go to services section, and I want to actually add animations to these cards right here. Now what we're going to do, instead of just going through the stress of actually adding animation to the components, we're just going to wrap a div around this. So I'll just cut this, I'll create a div, and then I'll just paste that in here, and then we can add the animation directly to this. So we're going to give a data AOS of fade right, like that. Save that, and I'll go back to the web page, and when I refresh, you can see it's actually faced to the right hand side. Great job. So I want to do the same thing for the next card. I'll just create a div, I'll paste this service card in here, and then I'll give this a data AOS of fade right, but this time I want to add a delay, a data AOS delay of 100. Save that. You can see that this one is going to come in, this one is going to come in. Then great job. And finally, we're going to do the same thing for the last two cards. So I'll just simply copy this and place that up here, and I'll take this div and I'll place this div down here. And then we're just going to change the delay to 200. And also copy this, paste this, I'll wrap this and this service card. I'll cut off the closing div tag and I'll place that right here. Format this, save that, and now the data AOS delay for this one is going to be 300. Save that, and now you can see right now, when we refresh, you can see the animation in. And this is also going to animate when we actually scroll to that point. It's going to start when we scroll to that point. Great job. So let's actually add animations to this resume section right here. So we're going to go to resume folder, and then go to resume section, and just scroll up. Now we actually have two divs in here, which is wrapped by this div and this div. So we can actually add animations to the div. So for this one, I'm going to give it a data AOS of zoom out. Then for this other one, I'll just copy this. So this other div, we'll give it a data OS of zoom in, like that. Then I'll give this one a data AOS delay of 400 milliseconds. I'll save that, and now I'll just refresh this and actually see that with smooth animation. So let's add animation for the project section. So I'll go to project section. First of all, I'll just format this. I'll add a div around this very first one. Create a div tag, and I'll just paste that in here. I'll give this one a data AOS of fade white. Copy this. I want to wrap a div around the second project card. Get the closing div tag. I'll give this one a data AOS of fade left. Then I'll just copy this. I also want to give the last card a data AOS of fade left. So I'll just cut this, wrap this around this div. Then for this third card, we'll give it a data AOS of fade white too. So I'll copy this. I'll give this one a data AOS of fade white and cut the closing div tag, wrap it around the project card. I'll format this, I'll save that. Now I don't have to add delete to this one, so I'll go back to the web page. I'll just go up and I'll refresh this. Then when we scroll down, you can see it actually slides in, and it looks really, really good. So next, we're going to add animations to the skills section. So I'll go to the skills folder, go to SRC components, I'll go to skills, Go to skills section. Now for this one, it's very simple. The data AOS is going to be flip right, and then the data AOS delay, sorry, spell that correctly, delay is going to be, now this is going to be dynamic. Okay, remember that we are mapping through this object right here. Okay, so for every of the card we actually output, we want to output the delay dynamically. Now, what do these cards have that is unique to them? Their index number, which is actually the key of the list. So we simply just going to do index times 100. Now, what this is going to do is that for the very first card, which is an index of 0, 0 times 100 is going to be 0. The first one is going to have an animation of 0. Then for the second one, it's going to have an index of 1. 1 times 100 is going to have a delay of 100 milliseconds. And for the third card, which is this card, that is going to have an index of 2. 2 times 100 is going to have a delay of 200 milliseconds, like that. So we'll just save this, go back to the web page, refresh, and you can see that smooth animation. Great job. So now I'm going to add animations to the testimonial section, which is also very simple and straightforward. So we're going to go to testimonials section. To this div right here, we're going to add a data AOS of fade right, and then the data AOS delay is going to be index times 100. I'll save that. Go back to our project and refresh, and you see that cool fading animation right here. I'll do that again. Very, very, very clean. And finally, we're going to add animation to the contact section. So I'm going to go to, where is that contact section? Contact section. And we have two div in here. We have this div and then we have this div. So we're going to add animation to them separately. For the very first div, which is going to, for the DTs, I'm going to give this a data AOS of fade right. And then for the second div, which is going to wrap around the form, I'll give this a data AOS of zoom in. I'll save that. I'll refresh this. You can see that cool animation right there. Great job. So we are actually done with the animation. Let's already go through them. You're going to see the first formation. This one is going to be for the hero section. And then we'll scroll to the section. You can see right now this animation gets activated. And also when we scroll to the next section, you can see these other animations get activated. And then we'll scroll again. We can see these other animations right here. We see these other animations right here for the project section. Then we'll see the skills animation. We see this right here. Also see the contact form animation. Great job. So finally, what we're going to work on is that we want this contact form to be functional. Okay, when we submit this contact form, we want to actually get a notification in our mail. So what we're going to do is that since we're not actually making use of any backend programming language or any backend for this project, we make use of a service called Web3 Form. So I'm just going to search for Web3 Form, click on enter. It's going to bring us right here. You can actually see the website. I'll click on this website right here, Web3 Forms. Now, if you've not signed up and you don't have an account, so you can actually sign up with an account. It's actually free to actually get started. Now, I already have an account, so I'm just going to log into my account. Now, after creating an account and logging into your account, it's going to bring you right here to this dashboard right here. Now, if this is a new account, your total submission is going to be 0. Okay, you're not going to see anything. It's going to be basically, everything is basically going to be 0. So we're going to go to forms. And you can see I already have one form project right here, my first form. I'm going to create a new form. I'll call this form John's Portfolio Website. And then we're going to specify the domain name. Now, since we are working, say where you plan to add this form for testing, just type localhost. Okay, so we just specify this is going to be localhost for now. I'll click on create form. And the form is actually created. And now we have our access key. Now, this access key is very, very important. We're going to make use of this access key when we try to actually make a post request to this dashboard to actually send a message. So I'm going to head back to our project. Inside this contact section, first of all, I'm going to make this a client component because I want to use a state to monitor when the request has been sent, so we can actually display something like a success message to the user that the message has been sent successfully. So up here, I'm going to make this a client component using the use client directory from Next.js. Okay, remember that this is going to actually ensure that we can actually run client-side JavaScript after the complete propagation of this component right here. And then here I'll create a state const loading. Then the setup function is going to be set loading is going to be equals to use state hook from the React library, and by default this is going to be set to false. Now, part of the documentation, this is what we actually have to do. I'm just going to go to the React implementation. We have to create a function called onSubmit, which I'm going to copy, hide back to our project. So after this variable right here, this stats variable, we're just going to paste that function right here. And obviously, we're not going to need this set results. We don't need this. We do not need this. And we don't need this right here. And this event is going to be of type React.form events. And then this new form data is going to be as HTML form element. Okay, specify the type. Then for this reset right here, we also say this is going to be a form element. So I just place this in here as HTML form element dot reset, because when we are successful in actually sending the data, I want to reset the form. And right here, we already have the URL we are pushing this to, which is going to be the URL for Web3 form they actually provided us with. It's going to be a post request, and then the access key, which is going to be the access key in our dashboard. It's going to be this access key right here we have in our dashboard, the access key to this project. So now this onSubmit function is going to be connected to our form. So when our form is submitted, I'm just going to scroll down. I'm going to say onSubmit. We're going to run this function onSubmit, and then we have to actually use the loading state. So before we actually start processing the request, first of all, we're going to set our loading state to true. And then after we are done sending the request, I'm going to set our loading state back to false, like that. And then we're going to handle the button UI, because when the request is being processed, we actually want to output something like a loading spinner for the user, and this is going to actually make a better user experience. We're going to say if loading, then we're going to output a JSX, we're going to output another JSX. And for this second JSX, we're just going to output this for when it's not loading. Okay, we'll just output this right here. And then for this first one, we're going to output a span, and then we're going to output a text called sending. We'll give this span some Tailwind classes: a width of 6, height of 6, border of 3, a border color of white, and then I'll make it 30% transparent, a border top of white, give it a rounded of full. Then I'll give it an animate property from Tailwind, animate of Spain. I'll just format this. Great. So if it's loading, we want to actually show this. So to actually see the loading, I'm just going to make this true so we can actually see. I'll make that true first, and I'll go back to our project and actually see what we are going to see when the message is being actually processed. We're going to see this sending and this animation spin right here. And this is a better experience for the user to let the user know that the message is actually being processed. Now, after that, the final thing we're going to do is that we want to output something like a alert to let the user know that the request was processed. So for that, we're going to make use of React Hot Toast. So I just install a library. I'll say npm install React Hot Toast. Spell that toast correctly. Enter. And we actually have that package installed. So I'm just going to close this back up. So we have to actually, first of all, output the toast component in our home page, okay, so that all the sections has access to it. So right here, I'm just going to put the toast, okay, toaster from React Hot Toast. And then inside our contact section, we can actually make use of that toaster. So after the request is processed, we're going to say if data.sources, and down here, we're going to toast or get toast, sorry, spell that correctly, toast. We're going to get toast from React Hot Toast. And then the message is going to be form submitted successfully. And then I'll just style it up a bit and give it a style. The background is going to be this here's color, and then the color is going to be white. And also I'll just copy these two. And then if we get an error, if the data was not successfully sent, we're going to toast error submitting form. Save that. And now the final thing we have to do, because we have to actually specify names to this input, because how would the Web3 form know which input is which input, the names of the input? So we have to specify the name of each input. For this one, I'm going to say the name of this input is going to be name. The name of this input is going to be email. This one is going to be subject. Sorry, spell that subject correctly. Subject. And then the last one is going to be the actual message. I'll save that. So let's actually test this out. First of all, I'm going to actually try to log the data. I'm just going to actually comment everything we've written here. Just comment everything up to this point right here. And then I'm just going to log it to the console. So we actually test this out. I'll say console.log object.form entries form data.entries. I'll save that. Now let's actually test this out. So I'll go back to our project. I just finished some stuff. So my name is John Doe. The email will be john@gmail.com. Subject of message, I say test, I'm testing, then the message is going to be testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, then we'll click on send message. We should actually see this in the console. Go to console, and we actually get that right here. Object, you can see right here we have john@gmail.com, testing 1, 2, 3, John Doe, and we have the subject test. Great job. And then we can just uncomment everything. Just go back, save that. Now let's actually send this to refresh this. Let's actually send this to our Web3 form. Name, I'll say John Doe. Email, I'll say john@gmail.com. Then subject of message is going to be connecting. Then for the message, I'll say I would like to connect with you. Then we're just going to click on send message. I actually get that form submitted successfully. After a while, it actually goes off. So we're going to head back to the Web3 Forms dashboard. I'll go to Forms. I go to this John's portfolio website right here. And we actually have one submission right here. You can actually see the submission. Name John Doe. Email johndoe@gmail.com. Then the message, I would like to connect with you. Then the subject of the message is actually connecting. So it's actually working. Now, this message right here, you're actually going to get this message. It's going to be sent as a mail. It's going to contain the name, the email, and the message. It's going to be sent to a mail to the email you actually placed when you actually created this project, or the email you actually registered this account with. So with that, we now have a working contact form. So next, what we want to work on is that we want to create this back scroll to top buttons. Okay, that's going to appear when we actually scroll off the top of the web page. Then we'll click on it, it's going to scroll back to the top of the web page. And that's very simple. Inside the general folder, I'll go to SRC component general. I'll create a new component, scroll to top button.tsx rfc. I just get rid of this import statement right here. First of all, I want to make this a client component. I'll say use clients. In here, I'm going to create a state const show button, then set show button is going to be equals to the use state hook from React, and by default is going to be false. Now this component is going to return a button tag, so I just call a button tag. Inside this button tag, we're going to have an icon in here. The name of the icon is going to be far arrow up, like that. And then we're going to give this some Tailwind classes. Give it a width of 12, a height of 12, a bg slate of 800, a cursor of pointer, a text of white, a rounded of full, a display of grid. Now place the items at the center of this container. So we'll place items, we'll do center. Also, we want to fix it at the bottom of the web page. We'll give it a position of fix, a bottom of 4, a right of 4. Just rearrange this. Now this component, I'm going to call this component inside the layout file. So I'll go to src app layout.ts, where we have this footer and navbar right here. I'll call the scroll to top button. I'll save that, and we should actually see that button right here, and it looks really weird. I just go back to the styles, go to scroll to button, text of white. That's because we were adding the styles to the icon. We were supposed to add the styles to the button, not the icon. Save that. Yeah, this is how it's supposed to look. Great job. Now we only want this button to show when a user scrolls off the top of the web page. Okay, so we're going to use a side effect to actually listen for the scroll of the user. So I want to create a use effect hook. Remember, to do side effects, we make use of a use effect hook. So I'll create a use effect hook. I only want this to run once when the component mounts. I want to add an event listener when the component mounts. So in here, create a function called const toggle visibility is equals to an arrow function if window dot scroll y is greater than 300, then I'm going to set show button to true. S will set the show button to false, like that. So now you have to add an event listener to listen for the scroll event. So now you say window, add it to the window element, just add an event listener to the window element. So on scroll, we want to run this function toggle visibility. And since we are adding an event listener in this function, we have to return a cleanup. So say return an arrow function is going to fire this right here, window dot remove the event listener for when the component mounts the scroll event listener with the toggle visibility. Format this. So now what we're going to do, we only want to output this button when the show button sets to true. So I just cut this off. I'll place this in an empty fragment. Then in here, I'm going to say show button. If show button is set to true, that's only when we want to render this component right here. Format this, save that, and when we go back, you can see when it's only going to appear when we scroll off. Okay, when we offset by 300, that's only when this is going to appear. So now when we click on this, we want to actually scroll to the top. So let's actually do that. I'm going to create a function. After this use Vercel, I'll create a function const scroll to top is equals to an arrow function. Then I'm going to say window dot scroll to top of 0. I want to scroll back to the top of the web page, top of 0. Then we're going to specify the behavior. We want the behavior to be smooth. And then we just have to copy this function right here. Then we'll hook up the function to this button. We're going to say unclick. I'm just passing that function right here. Scroll to top. Format this. Save that. So now we'll go back to our application. When we scroll, when we offset the screen, you can see right now when we scroll, you actually see the button. We'll click on it. It's going to scroll back to the top of the web page. So now we're going to do some quick fixes before we actually run some lint checks, because we can see right here that when we hover on this, the cards are not, the hovering effect is not actually working. Let's quickly fix that. So I go to the skills folder, I go to SRC components, skills section. Right here, I think the over effect is not working because where's that? Yeah, we are actually joining the transition and the over pop thing. It's not supposed to be together. Save that, and you can actually see. I'll just refresh the web page. You can actually see the over effect right here. And for the second fix, when we go to small screen device, when we open up this menu and we click on the resume section, it's going to scroll to resume section. Both the scroll behavior is not actually smooth, and also this sidebar is actually still open. So when I click on skills, it's going to go to the skills section, but this is still open. So what we want to do is that first of all, when we click on any link, it's going to scroll smoothly to that section, and also it's going to actually close up this right here. So let's do the first one. We're going to actually add a smooth scroll. So for that, we're going to add that to the HTML document. So we're going to go to the root layout file, go to app, or go to layout.txt. Now inside this HTML, we're going to add a Tailwind class to the HTML document tag. We're going to give it a scroll of smooth. Save that. Now, when we click on any link, it's going to actually scroll over there smoothly. It's actually better. Now let's actually work on the menu so that when we click on a link, it's going to actually close up the sidebar. So I'm going to go back to, I'll go back to the Navbar components, go to general, go to mobile navbar right here. So what we're going to do is that we're going to add a function to this link right here. So when we click on this link, we're going to set the navbar open to false, which means we have to pass the navbar setter function to this as a prop. So I'll go to the navbar.txt file where we're actually calling the mobile nav. We're also going to pass this setter function as a prop. So I just copy set nav open, scroll down, I paste this down here as a prop. So now we're going to head to the mobile nav, actually specify the type. So I'll go to that mobile nav. I'll paste that right here. I'll say this is going to be a React.dispatch. It's going to be a React.setStateAction. It's going to set it to a boolean. So we are specifying the type of this setter function, and then we just structure out the set nav open. So now when we click on a link, I'll say on click, I'm going to run an arrow function that's going to fire the setter function set nav open. I'll set it to false. Okay, so it's going to close up the mobile nav. I'll save that and let's test this out. So I open this up, resume, it's going to close it back up. Click on, go to contact section, it's going to close it back up. Great job. So next we're going to run some lint checks. So we check if we have any lint errors. So because if we have lint errors, we cannot successfully build this application. So I just open this up. So now I'm going to run npm run a lint check, and we don't get any lint warnings or errors, which means our application is actually safe to be built. So first of all, we're going to actually create a new GitHub repository because we want to push this code to GitHub, and then from GitHub we're going to deploy it on Vercel. So I'm going to head over to GitHub and just create a new repository. I call this repository portfolio websites Egbon Tech. I think we have that available. Then this is going to be a private repo, and then I'm just going to click on create repository. Now we actually have the command we actually run in our command line to actually push our code to GitHub. So I just copy up to this point, okay, up to this git commit right here. And then I'll go back to Visual Studio Code. Now inside this command line, we first of all have to add all our changes to the staging area. Okay, to do that in Git, you do git add. I'm going to add all. Okay, this dot means add all our on track files to our add all our on-track files to the staging area, okay, so that Git can actually commit the changes. So I click on enter, it's going to add all the files. So now when we run Git status, we should actually see all these green are green and they are inside the staging area. So I'm just going to paste the code we copied from GitHub. I click on enter, and it's going to commit all the codes, and then it's going to actually push it to GitHub. And when that is done, we can actually go back to our GitHub repo we just created. We'll refresh that, and we should actually see our project on GitHub. So now all that is left to do is actually to deploy this project. So I'm going to head to vercel.com. Now, if you've not created an account with Vercel, it's actually simple to do that. You can create an account, and I think you can actually sign in with your GitHub account. So just do that. Now, when you are signed in, you have an account. When you log into your dashboard, you're going to see all the previous projects you actually deployed with Vercel. Now, I want to deploy a new project. So I'll click on add a new project, click on project. And now the good thing about it is that we don't have to push our code to Vercel. Since we already pushed our code to GitHub, we can just import the project directly from GitHub. So click on import. I'm going to import that repo right here. Now the project name is going to be portfolio website Egmont Tech, and the framework preset is obviously going to be Next.js. Now, since we don't have any environment variables, we'll just click on deploy. Now, after the deployment process, you're going to see this right here, which means your project was successfully deployed on Vercel and is now live on the internet. I'm going to click on continue to dashboard, and then I'll click on visit website. And right now, this is actually really good. This website is now actually live on the internet, and you can actually share this with your friends or family or recruiters or employers. You can actually share this link with people now. Great job. Now, if you enjoyed this tutorial, smash on the like button and leave a comment below. 1 like equals to 1 prayer for the YouTube algorithm to actually push this content to more people like you who are going to find it very helpful. And basically just consider that as a little way of you supporting this channel. And if you've not subscribed, ensure you do that so you don't miss out on the next modern web development tutorial we're going to actually work on this channel. I'll see you in the next video.